Meeting to order for September 15th, and can we begin with a roll call, please?
Councilmember Termini? Here. Councilmember Bertrand? Councilmember Harlan?
Here.
Councilmember Norton?
Here.
And Mayor Bottorff?
Here, can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ryan, do we have any additional materials?
No.
Additional materials. Rich, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Staff has no changes.
Okay. This is the part of the meeting for public comments where we will allow the public to come and address us on any item that is not on the agenda. You choose to be an active listener tonight and not a participant.
We're all looking at you.
At this point, okay, I will check in with you frequently for further comments. Any city council comments? Stephanie.
We had a meeting of the Friends of the Soquel Cemetery on Monday here at 5:15, and we're going to have another one in another month. As you know, the temple has purchased the property. They own some adjoining property, and so they were able to purchase it for taxes only, I think. And one of our members has met with their representative, who's very eager to receive all the help they can, I think. And they've spent about $8,000 cleaning it up. There was a squatter living there, and there was lots and lots of trash. And there was other unauthorized or authorized people there that had records and so forth. Anyway, we're in the process of trying to get the accurate list of the residents there and family contacts and all of that so that we can help them. So little by little, we're going to be forming a nonprofit, the 501c3, so that people can give us donations that'll be tax deductible that we can use for various projects at the cemetery. You're allowed to go in to clean up your own plot, but you're not really allowed to go clean up somebody else's without that family's permission. So the question is, who's going to take care of all the plots for the people that don't have families locally here? And that's where a friends group can come in and help to pay for some of those expenses and things like that. So we're at the very, very beginning, but I'll keep you posted on that. But it's going in a great direction, and it's very exciting that we're going to have a happy ending to that story, I think.
Is there actually a record of people who are buried there?
Yeah, and we're trying to get a hold of that. And then there's people that have bought plots, and they just want to make sure that their investment is still there, that they paid the money, and they just want to make sure that everything is in order, and that they'll be dealing with someone that's going to be a lot more businesslike than the previous owner, and that it'll be in much better shape than the previous owner. So,
How many plots available?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Shopping?
But
The evolving process.
yes, yeah, we're just at the very beginning. So, if anyone has any ideas, and what the interesting thing is, Ludd and Barbara McCrary came to the meeting. I've always wanted to meet them, and actually, I'm not sure what their involvement is, whether they have plots there. I forgot to ask them. But they are very, very interested in, of course, local history. And Ludd has a huge file, apparently, at his house of the history of all the sawmills in Santa Cruz County, all the mountains in Santa Cruz County. Someone should work with him to put that together in a book. That is very, very valuable historical information before he passes. And so anyway, there's a lot of interesting people involved, with it on the periphery of it, and it'll be a fun project, I think.
I'm sure. Chuck? Nothing? Michael?
The Art and Wine Festival is officially over. That's all I have the energy to say to you.
And it was a huge success.
Huge success, broke all records, and thank you, Chamber of Commerce. Set up, clean up, it's there, it's gone. One of the greatest events that we have. Truly amazing. 34 years.
And running. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Capitola Friends of the Library meeting Saturday, 9:30 to 11 at the Capitola Library. Come, we're going to have an update on our plans, meet the new area-wide librarian and the head of the system, and it'll be an interesting meeting.
Any staff comments?
Staff has no comments.
Okay, with that, we'll move to the consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar. And do we want to remove anything from the consent calendar?
Move approval?
Approval. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Brings us to general government public hearing for the zoning code update.
Unless it's public hearings.
We did public comment.
You might want to just open it up. Come on.
We did it already.
Are you here to speak to the city council tonight on the public comments? Marilyn, would you like to speak? I would. You were late, but you know what, Marilyn?
Softies.
We are in a very generous mood tonight, and since you did make the effort to come here, it would be a shame not to let you speak.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not holding this out. And
While Marilyn's getting ready, this Friday night, the Minion movie. Come on down.
Okay.
Nothing but fun.
What time does it start, Michael?
It starts at 7 p.m.
Do they have it on the beach, or do they have it?
It's on the stage. We have not been able to maintain a blow-up screen on the beach because of the wind shifting, so it's always on the stage.
Thank you.
Marilyn, you may begin.
thank you much. So facts don't cease to exist because they're ignored, and the science on the adverse health effects from wireless microwave radiation, plus this is a surveillance and military technology and violates our privacy. They're so well documented, and it's not a mere matter of belief or concern. It's evidence, and we always have to look at the evidence. Part of the evidence of the harm, I have this article from about 10 years ago called The High-Tech Genocide. And you know, when we get cell phones or any devices, we need to really be asking, where did this come from? What resources were used? What happened to the environment? What about the labor, the people who are working, and the toxicity? So part of this states out cell phones, let's see, may have revolutionized the way that we communicate, but in Central Africa, their biggest legacy is war and the extermination of endangered species. More than 4 million people, it's more now, have died in Central America in a war over coltan, a heat-resistant mineral mined in the area that's used in cell phones, laptops, and other high-tech devices. So there's a picture here, the lowland gorilla, it's their habitat. I don't know how many are left, but as the corporations go in and mine, this is considered bushmeat, and millions of people have died. So you have to think, what's happened to this? And where Terry Tempest Williams, the author, spoke at what was Capitola Book Cafe about her trip to Africa and the genocide in Africa, she said in response to comments about this, yes, there's blood on your cell phone because of the costs. So this is just part of it, and we have to ask, what do we want to be part of and what do we want to be supporting? And when these cell sites are approved that are emitting radiation and harming people, you know, it's on one person's property, the actual site, but the radiation and the impacts are on all the neighbors. So this one person is getting paid by Verizon, say Doug Kaplan with the AAA building, or Stephanie Jenkins who owns the Begonia Plaza. They get paid and everyone else gets microwaved. A friend of mine who was in real estate says this really amounts to like eminent domain of the other
Marilyn, our clock's not
properties.
working, but it's
Okay.
been 3 minutes. You can just wrap up. No, go ahead and finish your thought.
Without any compensation to the other people. So unlike when you approve a garage or a building, this has huge impacts and violations of our rights. I'll give you copies of this. Thank you for letting me speak.
You're welcome, Marilyn. And did you wish to make a public comment tonight, or are you here for the zoning meeting? Okay. So what we're going to do, since there's a very limited amount of people, if there's any item that comes up when we're having discussions through, just raise your hand, and I'll allow you to come up and speak on that item. And otherwise, I'm going to assume that as we go through item by item, you'll be okay with that particular item. Fair enough? Thank you. So with that, we will go to the general government on the zoning, and where are we going to start at?
So we are going to start at Chapter 17.40, Residential Overlay Zones. And this evening, we'll start there. We're going to skip over the Coastal Overlay Zone.
Okay.
And then we'll head into the citywide standards. Just for the public's benefit, I think tonight we'll make it through height, setbacks, and floor area, also accessory structures and uses. We'll try to make it, I've got slides that go all the way up to Chapter 17.74, Secondary Dwelling Units. So we'll see how far we get. Some of them I only had a couple comments on from City Council, so there wasn't that many changes.
Okay.
And if we have plenty of time, we can head into secondary dwelling units and parking, but we'll see how far we get. But
Let's be optimistic. Okay.
Let's be optimistic. So we'll start with Chapter 17.40. This has 3 sections in it. The first is for affordable housing, also vacation rental use, and village residential overlay. Within my slides, I have highlighted items that have been asked to be brought up for discussion. But as we move along, if you'd like to have me stop, just let me know, and we can discuss any items that are in this chapter. So first, within the affordable housing overlay, the major changes were that the setbacks were decreased to match the underlying zoning. Originally, the setbacks were even larger than the underlying zoning. The heights have changed to match the underlying zoning, and the pedestrian orientation design standards were removed because they went above and beyond what we require for the multifamily. And when you're doing affordable housing, usually you don't make your standards more strict. It's at least at the base zoning of the underlying zoning. The applicability for this overlay zone is there's a 1 acre minimum in multifamily within the multifamily zoning district. So that's where you can have an affordable housing, where the affordable housing is applicable. The permitted residential density is up to 20 units per acre. And the income restriction is that a minimum of 50% of the units shall be income restricted. So if 20 units per acre, 10 would have to be income restricted. We did have a question that came up asking, should we extend this to the commercial and mixed-use districts? And I quickly wanted to talk about that. Within our commercial and mixed-use districts, the permitted residential density is at 20 units per acre within the general plan. So by extending this to the commercial districts, there really isn't an added incentive for the affordable housing overlay. So that's why it does not exist in there now. Within our housing element, it is not one of the suggested changes at this time, but should there be the need to extend it to the commercial areas, that is something we could add to the housing element in the future. But I don't know if there's any comments on this. We
Put a map up so
stop
we can
there.
see. Do you have your map?
I don't have a zoning map on here, but it would be all the multifamily districts. I can see.
It seems like inclusionary housing should be included in mixed-use residential commercial, I would believe, especially since that's the area where we're going to find the most benefit for, income disadvantaged people to find a place to live.
So I should state that it's required within the commercial and mixed-use districts to incorporate affordable housing once you have up to 7 units.
I was just
That
responding
should-
to, I thought so, but you're asking us if we should include it, and I think by law, it's included.
So, Councilmember Termini,
For a very short discussion.
there's a distinction. We do have the inclusionary or affordable housing program that applies to any multifamily project in the city. This particular overlay zone really only applies to 2 sites in the city, the Quality Inn site and 600 Park Avenue. This was an overlay, as you recall, that the city placed on to satisfy housing element requirements from the state during the last cycle about 8-9 years ago to satisfy that requirement. So really, it's a real narrow overlay zone, 2 sites, and allows them to get some extra density should they provide affordable housing.
Do we want to look at smaller parcels in case a parcel wants to change, a half-acre parcel wants to change? That would maybe be an opportunity for some commercial affordable housing mix. And I'm thinking of Fast Eddie's, but that's already included in the mixed-use zoning, so that would already have the requirement in, or not a requirement.
So the affordable housing overlay allows a density increase only on two properties, the 600 Park Avenue and the Quality Inn site. It doesn't apply anywhere else in the city, but the inclusionary housing ordinance does, where they have to provide affordable housing. If the council desired it, we could certainly extend it to other properties in the city. That's tantamount to giving them increased density, if that's something we wanted to do.
Well, I think it's something we might want to look at with the continued housing requirements from the state, and also, just my bad example, if there's a fire at Fast Eddie's and it burns down, what do we want to see there? Or other locations
It's a
like that.
Fast Eddie site?
The Dharma site.
Dharma site.
Yeah, I mean, we would certainly want to have Dharmas back there, because we all love Dharmas. And we might, and Mid-County Audit, we'd love that, we might want to have that there. But
You don't
anyway,
like Fast-Eddie's?
I haven't ever been there. I walked in once, but I have never hung out there. So I'll put that on my list to do this week for professional development. Yeah.
So all those sites currently have a 20 dwelling unit per acre limit, which is the maximum set by our general plan. So if we wanted to go above that 20, we'd have to amend our general plan, which is something we could do outside of this process.
But it doesn't require affordable housing
They would have to comply with the inclusionary housing ordinance and
if they
set
did
aside.
7 more units.
Right.
But this would require all the units to be affordable?
No, it's still a voluntary program where if somebody comes in and they're interested in getting more density, we'd say, okay, provide some affordable housing and the city will allow you increased density in exchange for that public benefit.
We might just want to look at some other sites, just open it up.
Well, the ones that you've mentioned are actually prime sites where that would be the best for that to happen. So I don't know what we need to know. Go ahead, Dennis, you had a question.
This whole subject may need its own discussion because it really expands. A lot of jurisdictions, what they give you, for instance, if you have a project, you're going to put, let's say you're going to put 10 or 20 units in it, that they would give you increased density if you declared that all of them are affordable or low income. If you decide to do a project where and what you would do is build like SROs where you'd build 380 foot or 400 square foot units, but you could get 20 in there instead of 10. I think, if we're going to encourage people to do smaller units or encourage people to do affordable units in this town, we should put those incentives out there. There should be incentive for people to do that kind of density, particularly along our transportation corridors.
So we do currently have that allowance through the state density bonus law. So anybody that comes in right now, if they wanted to guarantee affordable housing provisions, the more units they provide, the more development standards they could ask us to relax. And we'd be mandated to comply, whether it be general plan or zoning code limitations.
Sometimes my terminology gets confused between low income, which is set by a housing authority what low income is,
Right.
and inclusionary housing is actually a different
Moderate
baby.
income.
Yeah. So do we have an avenue if a developer comes in and wanted to do twice the number of units if he does small units and they're all guaranteed to be low income?
I don't think to that extent. The state density bonus program is set up based on income levels. So if you provide housing for lower income levels, you get more incentives to do that than you would if it was moderate income. But a twofold increase, I don't think you could quite achieve that level
was just
of
an
increase.
example,
Right.
but I think that there should be something within our codes to encourage developers to do that. In other words, if you don't have it has to, in essence, it could be a financial encouragement saying, look, it's the same deal, but what you're going to get, you get twice as many units. All you have to say is that you guarantee that they're low income. Right. And being able to give them that. Because if you don't have that out there, nobody's going to do it. Mm-hmm. We're not going to end up with affordable units in this town.
So I think the program you're describing, I think we'd have to open up the general plan to accommodate that as well, because that's where we set our density limits. Mm-hmm. State density bonus law will let you go above and beyond that to some extent. But we might have to tinker with the general plan to achieve a program like that.
Before I take your question, I just want to kind of bring it back a little bit because we're really getting out there. This is specifically for 2 parcels in town that meet the criteria, 1 acre. That's all we're trying to do right now. So,
And one of the things that I think we'll do is we'll specify in the applicability section that it is these 2 properties. It's not everywhere in the city.
So back to my original question, should we extend to commercial and mixed-use districts? Could you explain? I know about the 2 parcels.
It wouldn't apply because all of our commercial and mixed-use districts have a maximum density of 20 dwelling units an acre, which is a ceiling set by the general plan. So in order to give something above that, we're opening up the general plan to raise those density limits. It's not something we could do through the zoning code.
Got it. Thank
That
you.
includes the 41st and Capitol Road corridors?
Right, that's our maximum density currently allowed in the city.
I think those are perfect example of places we want to have that kind of density. What do we have to do to get that in those zones, like Mike said?
We'd amend the general plan,
We have to amend the general plan.
yeah.
Even with the general plan, even with us already have a 20 unit maximum on this, are we stuck to that if we were allowed to give density bonuses? Can't that be written into the zoning code to allow for a higher density?
You can't write something into the zoning code that overrides the general plan. I mean, you have the state density bonus, and right now, by virtue of it being in the housing element, this overlay zone does allow you to go over in these medium residential zoned areas.
That's why.
Because it's in the general plan. Right. So this section of code is in our housing element that refers back to it.
But we couldn't rezone other sites without, again, amending the
Correct.
general plan. Okay, I get it now. Thank
It's all
you.
about the,
Thank you,
Chuck, you had a
yeah.
question, I'm sorry.
Actually, I support revisiting the general plan to address housing and affordable housing inclusion within the city. I don't think our present provisions are adequate, quite frankly. But to the point, as the mayor said, I'd like to add 2 sites, or suggest that the council add 2 sites. And maybe this is not appropriate at the time because the representatives aren't here. But the one on 38th Avenue that was the old freight salvage. Now, I know we've already approved a plan for that, but if it ever comes up again, I'd like to have this parcel approved for the overlay to give that option for increased housing. And the one that just came up that Stephanie told me about was the old, was it English Tea House, and then there was a sauna there and stuff like that. And I know that's being considered right now for development, and this might offer the developers some options. So those are 2 sites that I would like to have included.
They're not an acre. I think the one on 38th is not an acre. It was less than an acre, so it wouldn't meet this criteria.
Okay.
Both those properties,
Both of
I
them are
believe,
less
are
than
under
an
this
acre.
area.
Yeah, so the criteria here is it's 1 acre.
Okay.
So that's why,
They seem large.
and I'm just trying to stay focused here because I think this is something simple, but, you know, Ben, I want you to weigh in here because it seems like people want to go back, or on the council want to go back to the general plan. And I'm trying to recall the discussion on this. Was there ever any conversation about having increased density more than 20 units per acre? Did that come up?
There was, and there wasn't a lot of support for it at that time. In fact, I don't know if anyone was really championing increasing density in areas throughout the city.
I think that we're more aware of that issue right now, so that could be part of the reason why that discussion didn't happen. And to my point earlier, if I could jump in, why does it have to be 1 acre? So the 2 sites that I just mentioned, I think are viable options for increased housing for affordable units. So why is it just 1 acre?
Let's ask that question. Why is it 1 acre?
You know, this section of code has been around, I want to say, since around 2004, when the previous housing element was adopted. I'm not really sure of its origin. One thing we could do, if the council is interested as a body, we could go back, research that, and also look to see if we could just easily make a change in the zoning code without making a corresponding change to the housing element or other section of the general plan.
I don't know if I'm feeling the sentiment we're talking about, but if down the road, you know, we're talking about the increased density, if the mall project were to be a place where we would possibly be able to do that, where it would work, that would take an amendment of the general plan for that to happen.
Correct.
I would be more interested in that than looking at just individual parcels. You know, if we're going to look at this thing, let's look at possibilities where we really can make a dent in this issue. I'm surprised that we don't have that ability on those transportation corridors to do a higher density.
Yeah, that's a more general thing. These parcels were to meet the arena requirements,
That's correct.
and that was the reason why. It wasn't a policy thing.
I would suggest, just to save ourselves, because there wasn't a lot of interest to do that, if someone comes with a proposal to us for increased density in those corridors, that would be the time to have a discussion. The public would weigh in. We would have hearings about adding increased density. But I don't know that we need to do that now. I don't feel the need to do
No, I
that.
agree with you. But maybe we could agenda it. It'd be nice if it was out there.
I think if a project comes to us, if someone brings a project that they want increased density, that would be the appropriate time to talk about a general plan amendment. And I think we're getting off track with what we're trying to do with this, because I'm trying to focus on these 2 parcels.
Okay.
Question to staff. Following up on what you said, I think that's a good point. But that hasn't been passed by the city council or planning. So if someone did come to you, it's not our policy already. So you're just saying, I know that the city council might be amenable to this discussion. That's all you can say about it.
Yeah, if someone came in today and talked about those two properties or others and want to increase density, my response would be to require a general plan amendment. That's a legislative action that has to be approved by the city council. I'm not sure if it could be approved. General plan amendments are generally very difficult.
Okay, and so that's my point. If we wait for that, and that's what the person hears, they may just say, I'm going to go to Santa Cruz or something. But if we have something in place already, then we're ready for that project.
Well, we just approved a housing project over there, which,
I know. So if they come back, suppose that guy walks away, we've already had one walk away.
Even if he does, he still has, the next person has the same project, unless it expires on him. It's still in place. Yeah, the person isn't, it's
we
that
can
property
guess
tied to-
what people are going to bring to us all day long. It's like like with the example of the hotel. I think people have to come with a project, and if part of that project involves a general plan amendment, then that's, especially with this council changing in a matter of, a few months, it's like
Well, we have to be careful about density also because of the horrible traffic problems we're experiencing right now. I was just coming from it from the point of view of affordable housing overlay. Can we do it anywhere else for the potential of it? And I didn't realize that it would require a general plan change, so I'll put that on the back burner. Maybe next time we can do that.
Okay.
So are we comfortable with this as it is written here, with just these specifically two properties?
I have no problem with the two properties. I have a problem with just the 1 acre limit, that's all. And as suggested by Rich, they're going to research that and come back. And if there's no real reason for it, maybe we could entertain lower acreage.
Okay, moving forward.
Okay.
I have a question
Go ahead.
on page 40-4, if we're there yet.
Sure. Yeah, I think we
Yes, and I think I have your question on the slide for you.
good.
So is this to do with parking?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a parking requirement that projects shall provide a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces per unit and 1 off-street visitor parking space for every 7 units. And Councilmember Harlan brought up, is this enough parking for visitors?
And my point was that if we add more units at 600 Park Avenue or the other site, and you're going to add 7 units, that's 1 visitor, and already those units are going to have 2 off-street parking places, but they're probably going to have, maybe we'll have 3 cars, and so that's going to be a squeeze. We'll have to see how that works out. But, and if we have a unit that's 14, a project that's 14 units, you're only going to have 2 visitor spaces. I'm not sure that that's really going to work when you think of the number of cars that are in affordable units, which that I live next to and across the street from, that has terrible parking problems, because you end up with more cars than there are spaces for it there. And if we had one that was 21 units, then they would only have 3 visitors spots. That's not very many visitor spots for 21 new apartments that are there. They're going to have their 2, but just in looking at the usage that I see next door to me, that's not really going to be enough. And I know that if we doubled it, they had to have 2 for every 7 units, and that would be 4 for 14, or 6 for 21. That's going to decrease the amount of space they're going to have for these affordable units, but I really think we have to be really super careful about parking.
Other input?
I have to agree, based on experience with other developments we've had. It's
Hill
a
Street
good
is
point.
a perfect example. That's why we're so many cars.
Capitola Beach Villas?
Yeah.
Are we comfortable with doubling it to 2?
Yes.
Is that a motion?
I'd like to say something beforehand, if we could. I just don't like the automobile dictating how we design things. This is a perfect example of what we're letting it do. Yeah, it's not, we shouldn't be designing around the automobile. We should design around people and the needs. I'm not in favor, I'll go along with it, but I don't think it's a good idea.
It's just the problem, yeah.
We haven't seen that big a problem in the past. There are exceptions to that, but in general, we haven't seen that big a problem with it.
Drive on my street, Clear Street, Capitol Road. There's a lot of little streets in there where there's just a lot of units and there's not enough parking.
Well,
And there's jam-packed in
I
there.
just went over to Ron Skelton's house in, what's that?
Claire's.
Off of Claire's. I believe it's probably just about that. There's 2 for every, and then we're only 3 parking places in the whole thing for visitors.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works.
Doesn't
okay?
work very well. They park on the street.
Yeah, so I would not have a problem with doubling it to 2.
The residents would be happier too, I think.
Dennis, I hear what you're saying. I mean, we're talking about getting rid of the car and maybe down the road you could recapture that space, but I wouldn't think it would be a bad idea based on what I see. I just went to Ambag, and they segueing a little bit here, but they're talking about, they're building these houses in Salinas, and they're talking about the RENA numbers. We got another big thing about RENA numbers. And they're saying that they're designing homes in Salinas for 6 and 7 bedrooms because families are coming and they can't afford to live in it, so they're all living together. Well, if you put that many people into a house, there's going to be more cars than 2. So if you're happy with doubling, I think it's a reasonable accommodation.
Can I ask, got a question about, when you're talking about projects, are you talking about 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom? What are you talking about?
It's an individual unit, doesn't specify.
Doesn't specify. So if you had 1 bedroom, you already require to have two parking spaces for a 1 bedroom. That should be significant. It seems like it should be more tied to bedrooms than for the project, because if you did a project that were SROs or one bedroom, you shouldn't be required to have, for every unit, be required to have 2 off-street parking.
I agree. That sounds reasonable.
Is there a method you could tie it to the number
So-
of bedrooms?
That's something we could look at, particularly as we get into the parking chapter. The one suggestion I would have is that the standard that's projected before you is a reduced standard from other multifamily developments as an incentive to build affordable housing. I think if we're going to get rid of that incentive, my suggestion would be that we keep the same parking requirements as any other multifamily zone, which is 2.5 per unit. So every 2 units provides a guest space. This is every 7.
That's 3 times as many as we're
Right.
seeing here. That's more than enough.
So if we're going to get rid of the incentive, I would just suggest being consistent with the other zones.
Are there other incentives?
Yeah, there is related to, of course, the densities we talked about, lot area per unit, setbacks.
One takes up more space and the other gives space.
Excuse me?
Setbacks. Give space.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
This
correlation.
is more lenient than the other.
Correct.
Would it be better just to be consistent? And you're
Right.
saying, was the incentive plan here?
Correct. It was an incentive to parking, but if the council's uncomfortable with it, I would say we just scratch that, and they're subject to the parking requirements of the
So we're going to
underlying
nullify
zone.
the incentive is what we'd be doing essentially. Are you okay with that?
You get more parking that way.
You would get more parking by doing that. So did you want to withdraw the motion and?
Why didn't we make one?
Wait, did somebody make a motion?
I thought you did.
I didn't.
I did not. I seconded. I thought you did.
I thought there was a motion. So apparently there was not. It was a mystery motion, so there is no motion. So the flavor, do we need a motion on removing the incentive?
I don't know if you need a formal motion. I think you could give us direction by consensus, or if there's division, you could certainly.
Are we comfortable with removing the
Vote on
incentive? That accomplishes a better goal than what you were asking for, so
Okay.
that's what we'll do. Onward.
Thank you for the question.
My other question was on 40-6, and that was just the number of years for the affordability. And it says 55 years, and I know in the past we've talked about increasing that to whatever. 55 years goes by pretty quickly, and it'd be nice to have affordable units for as long as possible. So I don't know what we talked about.
Within Chapter 18.02, which is our affordable inclusionary housing, that was removed, the 55 years, and the way it's worded in that chapter now is all affordable housing units shall remain affordable for the natural life of the unit.
Oh, that's good.
So if you'd like, we can make the same change to this chapter.
That would be good.
Okay.
Okay.
Falls down or burns down, and we get rid of it, but otherwise it can stay.
We good? Everybody good with that? Moving on.
Okay. Okay, we're going to now talk about the vacation rental use overlay.
Oh, I just have one other little thing, I'm sorry. We were going to change the name on 40-8 from, it says, one parking, number 4, one parking space is required per vacation rental unit. Parking may be on-site or within Pacific Cove parking lot with proof of permit. We were going to change that Pacific Cove parking lot to the new name of it, weren't we?
Beach.
Whatever it was. I don't know what it was, but whatever.
We'll make that change throughout.
Okay.
Thank you for
Okay.
doing
About
that.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Just don't call it service.
You see that?
Are we at that chapter now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I do have a question.
Oh, sorry, I jumped in.
Go ahead.
Page 40-8, on number D, required permit. Each vacation rental is actually considered a business? You have to get a permit for each?
You do, and that's a current practice.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, so I've got a little cartoon for you on the slide
Okay.
of
Very
vacation
good.
rental use to get us started. But we did a community-wide sweep this past summer that, at this point, we think we have most of the vacation rentals in compliance. Within that sweep, we learned a lot about vacation rentals, and the language that was in the code was a bit outdated. So the new trend now is you're not just posting a sign on your home and with a phone number to say, come and visit us when somebody walks by. With the new online platforms such as VRBO, Airbnb, and HomeAway, people are controlling this from inside their homes. They don't have to have any type of advertisement on the outside of the home, so it creates a unique regulating issue for planning departments. Capitola had great foresight on this in that we have a transient rental overlay zone. We have a process in place for managing these. So what we've done is just simply cleaned up the regulations. We've changed the terminology from transient rental overlay within the code to vacation rental use, so it really reflects exactly what's going on. We revised the development standards for clarity and also to update them to reflect the fact that they're now an online service that is posting these. And we've updated that there's now a new requirement that all posted online services for transient rentals, vacation rentals, will have to actually list their permit number as the first item within their posting. And then we've updated the parking, and then what happens if you're not playing by the rules. So that's been clear. And within the new regulations, there was a request to discuss the maximum of one sign per structure that's not to exceed 1 square foot in size. Councilmember Harlan had brought this up and wanted to discuss whether or not should we make that smaller? Is the 1 foot too big?
Well, I drew a little picture of, well, you know what 12 by 12 is going to be. It's going to be bigger than this, the size that we have now. And so this is, that's 6 by 6. And that seems to be big enough to have on half the buildings in the village. That's what I object to is, sign, vacation, rental, all over the village. I don't like that look at all. And I'm happy that they want to rent their property, but I don't want to see all those signs. So I think if we make it smaller, 6 by 6, that's big enough for people to see when they walk by, drive by, and that it's not going to be quite as intrusive as that larger sign.
I think most of the rentals I see have a box, they're pre-made boxes, and they're made for 8.5 by 11 sheets. So the box is already going to be that big. I don't know
Well, the
if we're
box
saving anything.
for information.
Yeah, you put it in a box because otherwise they'll melt.
Can you
They'll
live with
spill on the
8.5
street.
by 11?
That's the size.
I think it's too big. I think that's too big. I just don't like seeing all those signs all over, and you walk down the street, and you see them up and down, all over, on the houses, on the buildings, on these, on this.
Well, they're
one.
gonna-
Just looks totally commercial.
They're going to have a sign, I'm just trying
Because it
to.
is.
But
How much do we get from these people? At 10% of their nightly take.
It's more of what do we want the village to look like, and the village is a place where people live.
And get rid of the transient occupancy zone.
Well, they can have it, but we don't have to have all that advertising. That's the thing, it's a sign.
Well, they're going to have a sign no matter what, so I'm just trying to think that the standard form of advertisement is 8.5 by 11, and it's like, everything's built that way, and
Well, then why are there signs 1 foot now? That's 12 by 12.
well, we would
That's
just,
how it's
we would
drafted,
dictate
isn't it?
right here, 8.5 by 11, which would make sense.
I won't support it. I think it's too big. I think they could do with a little, even a tinier sign, just something very small like that.
Well, it is true, the signs are less relevant now
Yeah.
with the way they advertise.
Yeah,
So they don't
So-
even need it.
yeah.
Why not make them smaller?
So is there a definition in here that states that transient occupancy means 30 days or less?
See? You
Yes.
can-
It is written in here.
You won't mind to.
I'll get to them. These are like for the brochure, would this be the same as their brochure boxes? Is that what we're talking about, or is this something different? Currently, there's brochure boxes.
How about this size?
Sure. Smaller. Less commercial.
I mean, that's big enough.
4 1/4
I mean,
by
if you only
11.
saw a few of them, it'd be one thing, but you can't count how many there are in the village. There's a lot.
I understand. I'm trying to be uniform. I just know that this is a uniform size that they build boxes for, and I know they don't build boxes for the other ones, and they're going to, if we're voting between no sign or a sign, it's a different conversation, but whether it's this big or this big, none of us can read something that's this big. We have to pull over and see, at least from here, you might be able to say, I can rent it. I don't know.
So I'll bring up one other item with this. Whenever we change the sign standards, it's something that as they're allowed to stay as they were. So you'll have a lot of non-conforming 1 square foot signs out there. And all new signs will have to be, say, 4 1/4 by 11 inches.
How many new ones are we going to get?
So as we get new ones, so over time, they'll get smaller, but you'll have this code enforcement item going on of people calling in, oh, it's not 4 1/4 by 11, it's a 1 foot sign still.
Like a parking space being
And you
2
will be
inches too narrow?
spending city dollars on staff time to regulate less than a 1 square foot sign. So I just want to bring that to the table because we will get the call and.
But when are we going to have turnover? They're all in place right now. Who's going to turn over? Nobody. So they're just going to want to add, if anything. They're not going to decrease
The new person
probably.
that comes and wants to put a sign up will say, I have to do the small sign, and how come the guy next to me has this big sign? That's all that's going to happen.
What new person? I don't see that much turnover down there.
If they're
So,
adjacent to you.
I'll make a motion. Right now, it's 12 by 12, right?
It's actually 1 square
We'll
foot.
reduce it to 8.5 by 11, which is reducing it by a third. I move that maximum sign be 8.5 by 11.
Second.
Any further discussion? I'll try it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
That motion carries 4-1 with Councilwoman Harlan dissenting.
Boil the frog slowly.
It is 8.5 by 11. It's been reduced. It was 144 square inches, and now it's down to
Don't do it.
90.
88 square inches.
Something like that, 90.
You had your calculator.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Any other comments on the vacation rental use overlay?
I'll make a comment that it's the best system in the whole county, by far.
It is.
You talk about the county and what the city of Santa Cruz go through and this stuff. Ours was a definite overlay.
We're ahead of the
Yeah,
curve.
we're way ahead of the curve.
And there was a couple of news stories around that inaccurately depicted this meeting as considering expanding
Oh,
the overlay, and we should let the record show this council is not in favor in any way, shape, or form of expanding the transient occupancy district. And is that,
I would say we are unanimous on that.
okay, good.
Doc, would you
I just
agree?
wanted to get it in the minutes.
Okay, good.
that was a great lead into what I was going to bring up next.
Oh, great.
I'm working for you, Katie, here.
Another question.
Question.
Oh,
Okay, so sometimes we have to have inspections. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we have a fee attached to that inspection? Because there's problems and stuff like that, and then someone's going to have to go out like Brian, and it seems to me if they're requiring our attention, there should be a fee for that service.
there is a fee to apply for the minor use permit.
Yeah, but that's the first fee. But if someone has to go out and do inspections because there's been problems, et cetera,
Okay.
it seems to me that should be addressed by a fee. Our guy has to go out and spend time.
I don't believe we currently have anything written in the draft code that requires an inspection. I think an earlier iteration that was there, and we've since taken it out. Once we looked in further and kind of into the building rules, since there isn't really a change in occupancy for a vacation rental.
I read something about that. I will check that out again.
There was one in a previous version, so you may have seen it, and it's been changed.
Is there any building requirements in an application for this?
There's not. That's something we looked at. There's no change in occupancy, and then we were also concerned, it's a residential use, and if they rent out their use, are we going to make them put in ADA upgrades, for instance? And we looked at that, and neither the state or the feds really require it, unless I believe there's 5 or 6 more rooms available.
And the
For rent.
owner lives on site.
That could be part of it, too.
Well, one that we could do real easy just by word of mouth and permit is a smoke detector and a carbon detector. That's really, just write it in there. We won't have to go spec it, just say that that's part of the permit, because that's a safety issue that should be in this. Okay.
Moving on.
Before you do move on, I did want to point out that next week the Planning Commission is talking about possibly recommending to the council expansion of the TRO zone. The areas that they're looking at are across the street on Capitol Avenue because the TRO zone kind of zigzags in Capitol Avenue and doesn't come up to Blue Gum. And so there's been some interest expressed amongst those property owners that, why aren't we in there? Why does the line zigzag us out? Similarly, a couple of residents on El Camino Medio made that request. The Planning Commission is going to hear them out. They're going to consider it, make a recommendation to the council, and we'll report back to you on what they decide.
I think we just talked about that, and we're pretty unanimous. We could save a lot of time by you not bringing that to us.
It's already been noticed, and we're talking about it with them on Monday.
I would be curious to see what the planning commission's position on that is.
And the expansion area they're looking at is very narrow. It's about 4 properties across the street in El Camino Medio.
But can the properties across the street provide parking? That's the question. Very limited parking.
There's a couple that could, some that cannot.
And as long as you have a parking pass, you're allowed to use the TRO. So that is actually, your feedback is helpful for next Monday night's discussion. We'll chime in and let them know what we heard from you.
Monday night?
It would be nice if there's no overlay map that shows that.
Yeah, I can pull it up.
We can,
So Blue Gum is the lower Blue Gum, not the upper?
it's Riverview, actually, that comes,
From Riverview down
Yep.
on Blue Gum.
and Capitola Ave.
Expanding can be a touchy word.
Absolutely. You don't want comments, we're staying away from the Coastal Commission comments, are we not?
We are. We're staying away.
I'll turn the page.
So I've got the TRO overlay zone projected right now. You can see up here on Capitol Avenue at 411 and 409 that are in the zone, and then the other properties on Capitol Avenue that are not. So there's been some interest in at least considering, should those all be in there, and so we have a contiguous line in that zone. And then the other area would be on El Camino Medio. We recently had an unpermitted vacation rental, the site right next to the old theater parking lot. They applied for a bed and breakfast, and the Planning Commission said, well, we could look at possibly expanding the zone, and we'll talk about it next week.
A lot of work went into this zone. A lot of work.
So
And I'm not ready to second guess it.
my only interest is if there was an infill that got missed. That was so which one are you talking about specifically on El Camino Medio?
So I believe it's,
On the uphill side of
I think it's this property right here.
Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken, it's a blue, kind of grayish blue house there, right next to the parking lot.
As an opinion, I would say that's not infill. That's a clear line. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, but when I look over at when I look over to Riverview, I see.
That's curious.
I'm just curious. I said I would love to see what the planning commission's,
Maybe we should talk about taking 409 and 411 out.
They actually extend all the way from Riverview to Capitola Avenue, so I think that's why they were included. It's, they're longer parcels.
They bridge the.
They bridge, they don't
street.
have, yeah.
One in the fire department?
No, it's next door. It's the larger, I think it's the building that Fuse is in.
Actually, those 4 lots are a perfect place for a bed and breakfast. You think about it, because they're along the commercial corridor. They're not really in the neighborhood.
well, that's Charlie and is that Charlie and covered those 4
Anything
Yeah.
that's along Capitol Avenue is a
Oh,
good
yeah,
place for
and in the fire department.
fire station, Charlie and Company, and that existing house
there's
there
not
next to
The
the
small
trestle.
place you can really go
Right.
there.
Trying to force out the fire department.
Yeah, I mean you would think
You'd sleep in a fire truck.
Well, they had bed and breakfast.
Charlie and Company would be a good bed and breakfast.
Upstairs?
Right.
With no parking?
Well,
I'm trying to think why we didn't include them originally. There must have been some reasons why.
I believe it's because those parcels that are included on Capitola Avenue extend all the way to Riverview. They're the only ones that don't have
Oh, I see.
a break in
Okay.
the rear property line.
then that's how they got it. Okay.
Now we know their thinking.
Sorry, I opened up the trapdoor to the rabbit hole. Excuse me.
That's okay.
We were going to bring it up anyway.
Well, I still have the position. I would love to see the planning commission's take on that.
And it's noticed the meeting's Monday, so it's kind of too late to pull back on it now. We're going to proceed, I think, with the meeting, get their feedback, hear from the public. We've got
Why are they meeting
a
on
fair amount of
Monday?
interest. It'll be here at 6 o'clock.
I think the underlying is, I think by consensus, we're not looking at expanding it. If there was a question about an infill or something that was not, didn't make sense, then it would be worth looking at. But clearly, like on El Camino Medio, to give one where there's nothing else on that street would be inconsistent with what I see on that map, or what Michael said was the intent in drawing that up. So,
I'm more concerned about enforcement. a geographic area that's well defined. So there's not question between neighbors what it is.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay, we'll move on.
yes.
So we're going to skip 17.44. We'll be back at another date. And actually, before I go there, village residential is 17.40, and that's the village residential overlay of, I just want to make sure there's no modifications. It's page 40-9 is where it starts and extends into 4010. I don't have a slide on it because there was no requested discussion items. But this is basically like your Six Sisters and the different residential areas within the central village that are residential only. Okay. Next, we'll go on to part 3, halfway through.
Thanks for
In
that.
terms of the parts. So for height, setback, and floor area,
What page are you on, Katie?
we are now on page 48-1, so starting part 3. Okay, this is just a graphic of how we measure height, and by adding the graphic to the zoning code, I think it makes it really clear that it's measured, the height is measured from the assumed ground surface. The next section talks about setbacks, and we have a new diagram explaining exactly what a front setback is, what a rear setback is, and if you're on a corner lot, what's the exterior and interior.
If I can interrupt you just for a moment,
Yes?
and that is regarding table 17.48-1.
Yep.
It is my opinion, my strong opinion, because I circled it in red, so I must have a strong opinion, that we should not allow wind energy systems within the city limits. And it's listed there under above maximum height, but I believe that particular type of green energy is not consistent with an inner city application because of the noise it generates. And it should not be allowed anywhere within our city. How do we do that? Am I in the right section, or
You're in
did I
the
just
right
pluck
section,
something
yeah.
out of a table that shouldn't be talked about?
So I know that there's allegedly some small rooftop-style wind turbines that you can put on that, you know, are maybe 3 to 5 feet taller than the roof. Candidly, I've always been skeptical about their ability to generate meaningful energy, but that's, I think, what it was intended to address.
Their extension above the roof is not my concern. It is the noise they generate, and I think that we should make certain that that it's just not a permitted item.
Is there one
within our city.
around at all that we could go look at or anything? I don't know if I just have seen it.
There's one that was put up on near Pleasure Point, and I think it was soon after taken down.
I know there's one on the Santa Cruz Wharf. It's a little bit bigger. I don't think it's like the roof-mounted one, but, you know, it's not a big wind turbine that you would, you know, normally think of.
Would that preclude the windmill house from becoming operational?
That's right. The windmill house must remain stationary.
You could add the word silent in front of it.
There is no such thing as a silent wind turbine.
Well, supposing there is.
Until you stop the wind from whistling, it'll never happen.
I would support a silent wind turbine. If it doesn't make noise, they design it for urban use, then why not?
What page is that language on, the Bureau?
48.2. 48 dash.
Wind energy
And it's
systems.
Table 17.48.
Well, I'm happy to do without it because I think it'll just leave the
Delete,
problems.
is the
because-
recommendation to delete?
Yes, and if it appears anywhere else in our building code, we should,
I would second that motion.
thank you.
The diagram on 48-1, I'm going to ask you a question, probably you've been asked 3,000 times.
We have a motion on the floor.
Assume
Well,
grade.
is there a motion, there's a motion and a
Are
second.
you on the wind, we're on the
Oh,
wind?
go ahead, finish it. Go ahead.
Are you commenting on that, or are you going someplace else? Okay, so any other discussion on the wind systems? Okay, so we have a motion and a second on deleting that section, wind energy systems. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. That carries 4-1 with Councilmember Tran dissenting. So that's striked. And Dennis, go ahead with your question.
On diagram 48-1, and I'm sure that you've been asked this 1,000 times, staff, assume ground surface, does that mean existing ground surface?
So under A2, it says assumed ground surface means the line of the exterior wall of a building that connects the points where the perimeter of the wall meets the finished grade. So it's finished grade.
It's finished grade. So you can alter the outside, actually, the outside grade then, to make it conform.
Well, then when you go to 3, it further describes that if grading or fill of a property has occurred within 5 years of an application, increases in the height of the assumed ground surface height shall be measured using estimations of the assumed ground
Okay?
prior to grading or filling. So,
But
we
this
would,
only-
we would look at a survey and see where the existing grade is,
Okay.
and that's how we would measure it.
Okay. And so you're only measuring from the perimeter of the building. You're not measuring anything interior to the building. Okay. So if you do a basement or such as this diagram shows, it's dug into the hillside, that does not count. Okay. All right, Orson.
Okay, next in table 17.48, the allowed projections into required setbacks. I'm going to go through a couple of these in detail. I've had a couple council members reach out and talk about friendly neighborhoods through interactive designs on the front of a home, such as front porches and walkways and that type of thing. So have that lens on as we go through these, and then at the end, I'll have a slide that talks about exact things that could occur if you'd like.
Comment about thermal recovery.
Oh, yes, actually, I forgot to create before we go here, we're going to take a step back to the table where you just moved to remove the wind energy systems. Councilmember Bertrand asked that we add thermal recovery systems and that they be treated similar to a photovoltaic panel. So, and sorry, I don't have a slide for this one. So within table 17.48-1, he'd like to add thermal recovery. And for maximum coverage, it would have no restrictions, and maximum projection above the height limit would be up to 4 feet.
And what is thermal recovery?
That's to get heat from the sun, basically to add to your hot water system.
Hot water, panels on the roof. Some roofs are of a slant that don't maximize it, and sometimes you have to tilt them up 4 feet.
They're different than solar panels.
They're
Same
Similar.
They look the
concept,
same.
Similar.
Yeah, aesthetically.
Actually, you get more bang for your buck in the sense of recovering, not using as much energy.
Is anybody using them?
Oh, yeah. Well, I got 3 houses down from me, they use it. It's not operable, I think, but they have one there.
Is it less expensive than solar, or about the same?
No, much less, much less.
So they'd have the same restrictions as the solar panels with the height. Okay.
Yeah, we would just add it next to photovoltaic panels.
Yeah.
Is there a consensus on that, or Dennis? Are you good? Okay, we would have a consensus on that, Katie.
Consensus?
Consensus.
Okay, thank you.
Very lively water meeting going on next door.
Yes.
It's redundant.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about setbacks.
The groundwater management basin group.
So within the setbacks, quickly, the open and unenclosed entry porches, stairways, fire escapes, landing places, patios, and similar entry features. Right here on the bottom of the slide, I show a typical lot it's 40 feet wide by 80 feet long, or 100 feet long. It would have a 20-foot setback in the rear yard, 15-foot setback in the front yard, a 10-foot side yard due to being on a corner lot, and then a 4-foot side yard on the interior. For these open and unenclosed entry porches, stairways, fire escapes, landing places, this is the outline of where that could occur within the lot. So this is an actual deck that's above 30 inches, or a landing place. And throughout, for an interior side yard, you have to keep a 3-foot setback, so that's why along that side you only see this deck coming out 1 foot. But in the rear yard, it could extend 6 feet out, the front yard 4 feet, and the exterior side yard 4 feet.
And this is over 30 inches.
This is over 30 inches, so we'll get to under 30 inches soon. So next, walls and fences used as landscape features for decorative screening. This has come up within the Planning Commission. These are allowed in the interior, side yard, and rear yard. They can extend 2 feet into them, and they're not allowed in the front or exterior side yard. So it's very limited where these could be placed. The Planning Commission had talked about adding an allowance for these. After creating this slide and realizing how restrictive we made these, we might want to think about allowing them to extend further into the interior side and rear yards, because 2 feet is really limiting. And then for decks that are 30 inches or less above grade on the interior, side yard, and rear yard, there's no maximum, but there is a minimum distance from the property line of 3 feet, so they have to stay 3 feet off. So in your rear yard, that deck is actually, it could extend 17 feet into the rear yard. It's actually more of a patio, is what I'll call it, because it's 30 inches or less. And there is no allowance off the front or the exterior side yard, and this is something that in these social neighborhoods, you're starting to see people put a couple Adirondack chairs out front in their little patio area, and as of right now, the way the code is drafted, that would not be allowed in the front.
Let me speak for the community benefit of a front porch. And under 30 inches, and we could even make it under 24 inches, however the council would like, but I think giving people the opportunity to make front porches benefits the entire city.
Didn't we have this discussion to try to promote front porches?
We did, but we never quite got to the point of actually doing it.
But the things we're looking at, how much safer a community is when people use their front yards. In my neighborhood, a lot of people have very small backyards, so they use their front yards. You walk down my street, you have people say, it's a wonderful feeling saying hi to your neighbors and actually sharing those events.
I thought when we first did this philosophically, we were in favor of promoting.
But we hadn't been.
No, we haven't
gotten to the section.
formally, right.
So yes, there was a feeling, and like I said, we don't need to say 30 inches. You know, we could say 12 or 24, whatever.
30.
But giving a place for people to sit in the front of their house, I think it's golden. It's a great way to go.
So in other words, do away with setback requirements for that type of patio.
Well, we can still maintain a setback, but let's say, this 12-inch high patio can come within 5 feet,
Okay.
which would give them
5 foot's reasonable.
5 foot. It has to be set back 5 feet.
Yeah, okay.
And I said 12 inches so that it could be basically a patio. So I think once we start to get to 24 and 30, it starts to become a deck, and it gets a little imposing.
If you do 12 inches, Mike, you probably eliminated wood decks, but you could have concrete decks.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
If you said 18 inches, you can get wood decks in there.
I don't know. I'll leave that to the rest of the
Could you
council.
live with it? I could live with 18, because if you wanted the choice of wood just as a component, because in order to get anything underneath there structurally to have that, 12 makes it pretty tough to get something. 18 would work.
Without the wood rotting away.
Right.
So we're saying 18 inches, maximum of 5 foot from the front property line.
I don't think I have a problem with that. The only time we had some discrepancy on rear decks was on Prospect, when there were a couple of property owners that built real big decks out overlooking the path that was there. And their neighbors didn't like that they were kind of imposing on their next-door neighbor by having a big deck and an outdoor fireplace and all this seating area and kind of an event area when they just had a little backyard that was kind of quiet.
And it was
and they
high,
just-
as I
yeah.
recall, because it looked down on the path and looked down on the neighbors.
Yeah.
So I think if we make it an 18-inch max, I think we've got something going. And it's front here. We're not talking
Right,
about
front.
rear.
I'm specifically just with the front, 5 feet setback,
Yes.
18-inch maximum height.
Correct.
Yeah, but I mean, even with this, the rear deck there was a problem. I mean, that's the problem you get when you have these homes that are on not awkward, but on different lots where it's the side yard, but it really is the front yard or the rear yard, and lots that are on corners, and they want to have their side, they turn the house around. Anyway, that's where you can get into stuff that's like, oh, I didn't think about that, but it meets the guidelines.
Let's go all the way around the house on this issue since we had a discussion.
Okay.
I got a couple of points to make here.
Are you okay with the existing yellow, or you want to change that?
I don't know what that means.
Well, no, we're adding the yellow to the front.
The yellow
But
is
18
exist-
inches.
The yellow is the existing, what we have right now, correct?
This is what's proposed. So what I just heard is to add yellow to the front.
Correct.
10 feet in the front.
But make it
18.
decreased in height to 18 inches, and it has to stay 5 feet from the property line.
Correct.
And what about the exterior side? Same? It can go within 5 feet of
Whatever's,
the exterior
whatever's here
side?
doesn't bother me. I
No,
mean,
you know, here's the thing is that the way we define decks today in the city is, it doesn't, it's concrete or it's wood. It's whatever it is. Right now, the rule is, you can't even put a concrete walk down the side of your house unless you're outside the 5-foot setback. Am I wrong with that?
3-foot setback.
3-foot
Yeah.
setback. That's absurd. Well, almost every house in the city has 4-foot setback. You can't tell them they can't do a concrete walkway down the side of their house. If they want a wood causeway, it affects nobody but them. And, you know, there is an issue about fire, you know, with wood decks.
as
and
long as
having
it's
to touch
not,
the house.
as long as it's
Other
not
than that,
elevated, we're fine.
If we stay under 18
Will we
inches,
stick with the same 5-foot setback with 18-inch on that exterior side?
no, not 5 foot, not 5 foot, 5
No,
foot
we're
wide.
saying grade level paths
5-foot setback.
are not part of this.
On the rear?
Yep, so right now the code doesn't specify for
side
an
yard?
at-grade concrete,
Exterior side, top.
Good.
so.
It's too wide.
We can
Because
keep- we
most
can-
houses don't have that.
Dennis, we're hearing that there's nothing in the code that precludes anyone from doing a grade level path
So right
on the
now,
entire setback.
the code isn't clear on it. I think it would be helpful from a planning standpoint to have something in here that says at-grade
Right.
flat work is allowed up to the property line, so that, to get rid of this.
Except we want to have the rain soak into the ground.
Well, yeah, I mean, they will be permeable. We know brick or
Yeah. But, but
pavers.
at grade's still too low. At grade, it should be, there should be some ability to have some kind of lift in that area. I mean, I don't see any problem with 18 inches all the way around the house. I don't see, 18 inches high, whatever surface you use.
I think it's a fire issue.
There only is if you're attached to the house, Mike.
No, I mean, I think it's a fire issue firefighting wise. I think the fire department may want to weigh in on it because we've heard about them and getting fire department weigh in.
Yeah, but
All the
these,
way around.
Ladders on the
right.
side and-
All the- yeah.
okay, that's fine.
Access?
I was focusing on the
I
front.
don't know. I
When you start going all the way around, it becomes an issue. If it was just on the front, that's why I was just focusing right now, because
We're working our way around the house.
I know.
Okay, my only point is that there should be some way to put a walkway on the side of the house and not worry about the 3-foot setback.
Well, I think Katie just gave us some language for that.
Yeah, I think we would write in some, make it clear. I mean, as it is today, if somebody came in and did that, I mean, I wouldn't consider that a deck. It's flat work, it's a patio, it's,
Exactly. At grade.
Landscaping.
The term at grade.
Right.
Okay.
Do you need a permit to do that?
You're building something.
no,
To put a path?
Oh, that's right. There's a height for.
that's right. And I think it's 30 inches. I think that's where that number comes from. That triggers a building permit.
Okay, so that I can understand, especially with the
Okay,
rain.
now the rear yard. The rear yard, if you want to put in your deck in a backyard, a lot of them are small. I don't have any problem with people going with their decks right up to the fence. Why would there be a problem with that?
The neighbors don't like it. They don't want all that noise and all the people and all that stuff right next to their.
That's what your
their
backyard's
fence.
for. I mean, if you're going to use your backyard, there's going to be that whether the deck goes to the side or not.
But
Well,
it
then we have to
encourages-
talk about the height of the fence, because I could see where, if we have a 6-foot fence and a 30-inch deck,
Well, I'm not talking about 30 inch. I'm saying we keep it under a certain level. In other words, that you're allowed to have the deck if you're under it, back to the 18 thing.
right,
Okay, and maybe you require it to have an 8-foot fence instead of a 6. But in my neighborhood, that's what people do. You look at their patios or their thing. Why should it be different from a wood deck than a concrete patio?
I think it's because it's a platform to look into somebody else's yard. I mean, I don't feel comfortable with allowing the deck to go right up to the fence, because you're in a position where you're standing there just looking into your neighbor's yard. I mean, people are trying to promote their privacy, and if we allow the deck to be 30 inches right at the
No,
property.
I'm not talking about 30. I'm talking about using the same as you do in the front yard, the 18 inches. Make your maximum 18 inches, allow them to have a wood deck back there.
and we
just like you
allow,
would a
we allow
concrete.
fences with 6-foot solid and 2 feet of lattice.
Yes.
That would solve the privacy issue, I think.
If you want to stick with the 18, it would be fine. I would be okay. Not the 30, though.
No, I agree. I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
I have a question. Do you want these standards to have, let me go back, to be separated, that there's some allowance for 30 inches, or is everything going down to 18?
Everything's going down to 18 inches.
Everything's, okay, I think that makes it much simpler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it helps not having that extra high deck, twice as height in the backyard. It just changes the whole feel.
So on this slide, what we would do is, for this, the interior side and rear, no max, we'd put no max for all, It would just say no max. And then minimum distance from property line, for the front, we would put front 5 feet.
Yes,
And
correct.
for the side, would you like 3 feet?
Then you can't have a walkway.
Okay, so, well, we can make a separate exception for walkways that says no max, no min.
No what?
No maximum and no minimum for walkways.
Right, 18 inches or less.
18 inches or less. Okay, so for 18 inches or less,
That, yeah, you could,
No max.
no max.
so in essence, from 5 feet in the front, everywhere in the lot could have a structure that's no more than 18 inches in height.
Okay.
And that's the easiest thing to enforce and describe to somebody.
And the only,
You're not going to do 18 inches in height if you do concrete. You're probably going to be 6 or 8 inches. If you decide to do a wood deck, then they're going to be that high. That's as low as you could be with a wood deck.
Well, unless somebody wants to walk out their house into the deck, and the house is up a little bit.
Well, they have a
If you have,
step.
if you have a, if you know, like,
They have to have a step going down
Yeah, that was
to the deck.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if we make it consistent for staff, that we say nothing higher than, on a wood deck, nothing higher than 18 inches in height can go anywhere in the yards with the exception of the 5-foot front setback. And concrete is its own ballgame. It can go anywhere as long as it's permeable, or whatever you want to call that.
yeah, we'll build it in that you'll be able to still have a walkway that leads from the sidewalk to your home within that 5-foot patch, but otherwise we'll have everything at 18 inches and just with a 5-foot front setback. Is that
I'll make that
cool?
motion.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I'm not sure, I kind of like to get some feedback from neighbors. What would they like to see? We're kind of making a decision in a vacuum, but what would they like to see? So
Well, it's
I'd
not a
kinda like
final
to-
decision. We're just recommending it, and then we're coming back to this, and we're going to.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it'll go to the planning.
This is a
commission, come back to
proposal.
us.
Right. This is our proposal.
But I
I'll tell
think,
you, Stephanie, most people already have it. Well, everybody's already done it.
but I like the idea
Not
that
unusual.
all the things we're being unanimous on or whatever, and it's all going to be out in the public, and then we can start hearing the feedback.
Right.
And I think that's a good, we've
I'm
done
just
the
not sure if
process
I'm in
right.
favor of without hearing from them.
Yeah.
So that's my point.
So I do have a question. So this is basically saying you can't have an enclosed area in the front of your house.
Correct. Not enclosed, it's open.
It has to be open, okay. So I actually have a problem with that because, knock on a lot of doors, as most of us have. And there's a lot of really cute little enclosed areas in this town, okay? So imagine where the garage projects out from the house. And so to get to the front entrance, you walk around the garage and then you go into the house. And so you're back off the street maybe 10 feet, depending on how far the garage juts out. And what I've seen is some people sort of put a wall there, it's trellis or something like that. Maybe it's even more substantial. And they have a little interior garden that's their private spot for entertainment. Now, they still have the setback from the street, which, whatever that is, 15 feet, 10 feet or something like that. But they like those areas, And I often comment on it, and they say, gee, I just love going out there in the morning before I go to work and have my coffee and something like that. And so the problem I have with this discussion is we're telling people what they can and can't do. And that's the problem we have.
Which is our job.
But I think some people would like the leeway,
Well-
as long as it's within certain kind of guidelines, okay?
Yeah.
And I think as
I have some,
some uniformity here. That's
I think you'll like this next slide, actually,
Okay,
because
Oh,
what is allowed in the setbacks, so after the table, you see accessory structures in setback areas. So what is allowed in setbacks now, and this is adding to the design aspects as well as the social, is you can have a trellis, you can have planter boxes and masonry planters that are up to 42 inches, so your idea of enclosing with some masonry features. Screened mechanical equipment, so your air conditioner can be in your setbacks as long as it's screened. You can have children's play equipment, a doghouse, trash enclosures, or similar movable objects. So these are, as long as they can move around and they're not permanently affixed to the ground, they can be in your setback areas. I think some areas that have a little more specified requirements are, before we didn't speak to pools, now we've put in a pool is allowed in your setback area, but you must keep it 5 feet It's allowed in the rear yard, but it must be 5 feet from the rear property line. A hot tub is allowed in the rear yard, but it must be 2 feet from the rear property line. We had an item there to be discussed. Also, fire pits, it's written up that they are allowed in all yards as long as they maintain a minimum of 5 feet from a property line. So with the hot tub, in this scenario, Councilmember Bertrand asked that we consider corner lots for hot tubs. And in this picture here with the corner lot, the area in blue also shows that because this home is in a corner lot, the back of the home can extend further towards the rear property line. So oftentimes a lot of the homes on a corner lot have the home built out without much of a rear yard, and he wanted the council to consider tonight allowing hot tubs also within the exterior side yard. And I believe an example that was provided was on the corner of Capitola Road and 47th. Is that correct? Near the glass.
Window store, the new place that just got remodeled. They put
The wood fence?
they put a wood fence 2 or 3 feet from the sidewalk, and there's plants, and there's a deck there, actually. There's a deck, and then there's a place for a hot tub.
So we can start the discussion with the hot tub, and then I'll just let you know in a future slide, we have more items to discuss in terms of backyard kitchens that are becoming more popular. Councilmember Norton asked that we talk about that this evening as well. So we'll start with the hot tub discussion. Thank you.
I have a question about the trellis.
Sure.
It says, number one, trellis structures that provide support for plants are allowed in all required setback areas, does not exceed 10 feet in height. Are we getting any 10 feet? And we getting lots of trestles for 10 feet for screenings? And is that an issue that we want to be concerned about?
I would say we haven't had
I don't think we're
a
seeing
lot. I think maybe in the past year, I know of one that definitely came in, and it was a new home in the Jewel District that was.
Opal Street?
Yeah,
That
on
one?
Opal Street that
Yeah.
installed one. But
Yeah.
other than that, there may have been 2 this year that I can think of offhand.
I just want the council and the planning commission to be aware of it, because it could be an issue where they're building these big high trestles. I mean, that fellow did for screening from his next door neighbor's property, I think.
But the sight line from the driveway will supersede that, correct? Let's not do conflicting things, because we have maximum heights within a certain distance of the edge of the driveway. We have to maintain that, or else you pull out your driveway.
In the front, but I'm just talking about in the back, or on the sides or something, if neighbors are going to object, because all of a sudden now that the walls have gone up 10 feet all down here or in the back or something. I mean, I don't want to anticipate problems, but and maybe we just will address it if it becomes a problem. But, I mean, that's high, that's high. And, somebody, if they can do that, it would give them a whole lot of privacy, but is it going to be okay with the neighbor to be surrounded by this 10-foot wall? Essentially a wall. It's a trellis, but it's a barrier. I don't know. I'd want to talk to people and see how they felt about it. It's up to the community and see, is that something you want or don't want?
Councilmember Harlan, I should clarify that in our existing code, this is the same standard that's allowed, but it's restricted to rear yards and possibly side yards. I'm not remembering. Just rear yards. So by allowing it in all yards, it would probably be worth the discussion of whether or not you'd like to see these in front yards as proposed, because you can enclose them on 3 sides, so, or we could.
Let's go around town and take some pictures of if we have any of these and see whether or not they're working or they fit or they don't. I don't know if we have any to look
I could
at.
take some pictures, Steph. I know people have done.
Our concept was to open up the front yard, not to enclose the front yard. What we just talked about was decks to allow you to open onto your front yard, not to actually close it in.
Well, see, my point is, I think, I have a porch in front of my yard. It's 4 feet. I wish it was bigger, but, it would extend above 18 inches, so I can't extend it. But I have no problem with the porch in front, but some people like the little enclosed bit, they want their privacy. I just don't want us to say what they can and can't do.
Is your garage even with the front of your house?
No, it extends out. I mean, so I could build this little trellis.
You can build a 6-foot fence out to the front of your garage at any time.
I can.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
So you can do what you're asking to do, Josh, you can do that. The only time you couldn't do it is if your garage was set back. You can only build to the farthest front structure you have. You can build up to that with a 6-foot fence.
Okay,
So that gives you room to do a patio like you're asking.
okay. My wife and I discussed this. She wants the porch sometimes I want a patio, so, but I just don't want to tell people in this town that they have to have porches and can't.
So you can just cover the back of one side.
We just gave them both.
Yeah, we just gave them both, but it's not permanent, so I'm happy, with the.
Yeah, you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, most people can. It's the only difference is if their garage is even with the front of their house,
Then
they
there's
can't
a
come out.
problem. Yes, yeah. And I don't see those. I see more of a patio maybe, or a porch, the bathroom situation.
A question on the fire pits. How high can those fire pits be? I'm reading this, it says we'll allow them. According to this, you could put a fire pit in your front yard, 5-foot setback with the new thing we have. Still be the 18-inch high.
We don't have a,
I know.
let me just make sure, fire
I'm listening.
pits.
Yeah, right.
Not making me happy, but I'm
It
listening.
does not require a certain height, so would you like a maximum height tied to fire
Well, I'm just trying to
pits?
think what I'm creating, that's all.
You couldn't, we wouldn't want a fireplace up at your eye level.
I think if we don't put a number, there should be some number that's,
Somebody's going to come in and we're going to say what you
Nobody's can build one over 30 inches high. That would be the height.
I don't know. People like a bar height, everything. They would put stools and a big, what we just allowed here was an 18-inch deck because we were trying to keep it down. That was the intent. And if the fire pit was, it's now that it's only 5 feet
How
from
about
the property
how about
line.
in-ground fire pit?
I don't want to tie their hands, Stephanie. I just want to say I want to put a number on it, okay? And I'm thinking that a number that pops into my head, if there was a number that just sounded,
Well, fire
if you
pits
told me
like
that it was a
barbecue.
30-inch height, that would probably be reasonable.
I think that'd be reasonable to ask people to do that.
Is that a reasonable height for a fire pit?
Yeah, that's high. Your seating leg is 18 inches. So that's usually the height that people want.
I just think we owe it to ourselves to say 30-inch maximum, okay?
That would be fine. I don't, if that defines it.
Works for you, Barbara? 30
Well, I was
inches?
just thinking, they keep changing these styles. And
Yes,
so
they
what
do.
about the ones where you can stand? I'm 5 feet too, so if you stand and you have a fire pit, isn't there a possibility you can have it be 30?
You could, but, you could, you're absolutely right.
What's the other height?
But now that I'm in the front yard and I'm 5 foot from the sidewalk, I'm thinking I don't want them standing in this incinerator in the front yard. I'm thinking I'm thinking a casual fire pit in the front yard with 30-inch height is within the scope of what we're talking about. So I would love
That's where I'm going to burn my garbage.
I would love if you suggested a 30-inch number, okay?
30 inches.
Okay. Are you okay?
Otherwise,
I'm familiar with it, so I don't know.
they can go as high as they want as long as
Can I go back to your arbor?
Okay, I want to just close this out. Are you okay with 30 inches?
I'm all good.
30 inches, consensus for 30?
But no incinerator.
Not to exceed 30 inches.
Okay. And how about hot tubs in the exterior side yard?
In the side yard?
Exterior side yard. So on a corner lot, person doesn't really have much of a backyard, and they'd like a hot tub along the street.
They're still 5 feet from the,
They've got a 10-foot setback,
okay.
but it's essentially their second front yard kind of thing, their exterior.
How
side
close
yard.
could it be to the sidewalk?
Right now, the setback is 2 feet from the property line, so it could be 2 feet away from the sidewalk.
Hey, are you saying that the light blue, they can do it right now?
So the light blue area is where this home could be built to. Because it's on a corner lot, it's only required to have a rear yard that's the same size as the side yard
Side
of the
yard,
property
okay.
next to it. So this home actually, in this scenario, could extend all the way back. So there's a very limited rear yard.
That's their choice, to use their
That's-
rear yard for house rather than entertainment, so,
So in
those are
this-
choices they make.
Yeah, so that is their choice. They could not extend their home into their rear yard and have a nice hot tub in the rear yard. And the question was, should we allow hot tubs in the exterior side yard?
If it's 2 feet from the property line, why not?
You can't fence all the way to the property line with a 6-foot fence. On a corner lot, you can't fence it. You can't fence it to the property line. You have to be set back into the setback for a 6-foot fence.
So along a corner property line, we can go to the, but let's see, yes, so on a corner property line, your fence height is only 3.5
Yes.
feet in the updated code.
So I don't know who would want a hot tub outside on a 3-foot fence on a side yard on a street.
Some people might, but you're right.
It could add clutter.
No, I'm trying to, I would say, as long as it's inside of where a 6-foot fence is, that would be fine. And if you're saying there's no place with a 10, if the fence couldn't be built, then the hot tub couldn't exist either,
Yeah.
would be my interpretation.
The only place they could do their 6-foot fence would be from the back corner of the home coming across.
Then that would be the only area where the hot tub could be.
So we're not going to add an
I'm
allowance.
not going to have open bathing in the hot tub out with no fence. No, I don't think
That's a
that's.
good decision.
Your problem is your neighbors if you use it.
Watch yourself.
I mean, liability, everything, all that stuff, no. I would say no. We have consensus?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I go back to the front yard arbor with you?
I think you want to close out the consensus on the hot tub, so
Hot tub, I have clear direction.
we have clear direction, thank you. For the
Fire pit,
entertainment.
I have a maximum height. Shall we go on to the other social aspects?
Dennis had a question.
Yeah, you started discussing arbors in the front yard.
30.
Basically, I think what's discussed here is an architectural detail, where now you're not allowed to actually put a arbor forward from the house that could be some kind of architectural design. You're not allowed to do it. You have to push the arbor back to the setbacks. And the idea, I think what's being brought forward here is the idea that you could have an arbor in the front yard. Maybe it's turned parallel to property lines, maybe it's along the front, that gives you some kind of architectural detail. That's, and then, I've seen a number of them, and I will take some pictures for you, Stephanie, some new ones in my neighborhood, where they've actually taken, and their fence posts are 10 feet tall, right, in the back. And let's say they're 6 or 8 feet on center, and they'll run an arbor on the top, but the fence will only be 6 or 8 feet tall, and then the arbor just above it. And what they do, they put plants back in the yard. It actually works for both neighbors, but I think your point is well taken. It should be agreed upon that the neighbor behind it is okay with that, because you're building an arbor for them too, which most people would like.
I've seen that across the street from our current treasurer.
Yes, you did.
Okay, that's what I was trying to
You've
visualize.
seen it in our.
I was just trying to
backyard.
visualize where I saw that.
Where'd you get that idea?
We
So-
wouldn't permit that to go over a property line, though.
Yeah, right, it wouldn't go over a property line.
It'd
It
just be
starts,
higher.
the post is to be the back point, and then you cantilever it out,
Yeah.
and then you do your
I know
shelf.
one arbor that does bridge a property line,
Not mine.
yours and mine.
Just saying. That would be called an hours.
Just saying. Right?
So my point is that I personally would be okay with someone doing an arbor in their front yard, if it's an architectural detail that gave depth to the lot or shows some.
This would be a change, correct? Katie, allowing arbors in the front. Did the planning commission weigh in on this?
So currently, we have the trellis structure is allowed, but I believe in our fence section.
No,
we talk-
I'm confusing, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not talking about a three-sided closed arbor. I'm talking about a straight shot
An
or
open
a
arbor,
trellis. A trellis
Yeah.
would be the better terminology for it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I mean trellis, I don't mean.
So I did not hear any direction to change that trellis structures that provide support for plants and shade are allowed in the required setback areas if a structure does not exceed 10 feet in height.
Yeah, that's what it is now.
That's what it is now?
Is that what it is now?
That's what it is now. I would like to suggest one thing. It says, in the structure, roof remains permeable, so the roof membranes are 12 inches apart. It doesn't say anything about transparency, so I think we maybe should add something about it says, and the structure is open on at least 3 sides, so at least 3 sides of it have to be open, but maybe for the one wall that is closed, that it be at least 50% transparent, so that you don't have any of these issues with cutting off sight line and.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. We're okay.
Okay, so we'll add 50% transparency to the one side. Okay, so other items up for discussion for the social aspects of yards are outdoor kitchens. These are, if you've picked up a magazine recently, you've probably seen a beautiful outdoor kitchen that's being advertised. And as our regulations are currently written, it's not very clear on how to allow or not allow outdoor kitchens. This is something that the Planning Commission actually didn't spend time on. Councilmember Norton asked for us to bring it forward. We'll bring this back to them based on your recommendation this evening. But currently, we have accessory structures that are allowed they're allowed to have electric, and they're limited in terms of plumbing, but they can be in the backyard within the setback areas. That's one way you can treat these outdoor kitchens. You could say that, similar to an accessory structure, they're allowed to be within the setback areas, but they're only allowed to have electric. If you want to allow plumbing, you can do that as well. A lot of people come in and they want to have a little sink. We've seen them go as far as adding a dishwasher, so I don't know if that's something you'd like.
As long as it's on grade or on an on-grade patio, I don't see where it changes
Yeah.
anybody's life, you know.
It's a matter of, I mean, people love these things.
I would say if someone's building a pizza oven with an 8-foot chimney on it, we need to talk to them, because
Okay.
they can get
Hot.
not just hot, but imposing, you know.
Smoky.
Incinerators.
Depends on how you're making pizza.
You just said electric. Most barbecues are gas.
No, it's electric, like bringing electric service out there.
Oh, okay. So you're
Yeah.
not saying barbecues can't be.
No, so the electric would be to plug in your
Blender?
speaker if you wanted, or your blender.
Blender.
That could be.
We should have some provisions.
They
for
make
this.
solar blenders.
They do?
It just takes a really long
For
time.
camping. I know, I know.
Bike powered.
I'll get you one for Christmas, Jack.
So with the idea of these outdoor kitchens, do you want to limit for a mini bar, we limit the pipe width or for the mini bar, so you can't have a really large sink, it can only be a small sink?
Well, it's like, it's the drain size, inch and a
It's the
quarter
drain.
max.
Yep.
Right.
Inch and a quarter
There's
max.
nothing wrong with that. I think it's a building department decision.
Yeah, and no
Everybody's gonna
220
want
plugs.
24 inches in width, because that's what the
Yeah.
depth of a
She's
barbecue.
talking about the size of the drain pipe,
Yeah.
so they don't add a toilet out there.
Right.
No,
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
no.
Or a garbage disposal.
Garbage
You can live in an outdoor kitchen.
toilets don't work very good next to barbecues, unless you got enclosure. But you could limit barbecues by length. In other words, you could say outdoor kitchens will be restricted to 8 foot in length. That keeps someone from moving their whole kitchen outside. I don't,
Do we have any guidelines on these? I mean, anything else? We're just creating this?
I think the fewer restrictions, the better, and that building can, I mean, if they're building a whole kitchen out there, I think the building department can weigh in on it. I don't think we need to start talking about the length of someone's outdoor
How
kitchen.
specific do we need to get? I'm asking.
Well, okay, so one idea is that within accessory structures, there's an 80 square foot limit for an accessory structure. So there's that type of limitation. We've seen these come in with a nice L-shaped counter space that's probably 8 feet long on each side. So
and
they're
you can
really
buy
long. They
those-
could probably seat up to 8 people.
I know, but you could buy those that aren't a permanent
Attached,
structure.
yeah.
So it doesn't matter. I'd rather not even talk about it.
You can't, but you can't put one of these in an 80-foot container structure outside. We're not talking about putting them inside of it.
No, it's just giving you a.
No, limit the size to
Footprint.
80 square feet.
Footprint.
Footprint and I just did
that's
some
huge.
numbers.
Because they're 2 feet wide.
It's huge.
Yeah.
That's
Well, they
40
could-
feet long.
Some of them are 4 feet wide.
That's a nice
Some of them are
kitchen.
4 feet wide.
They could be wide, yeah.
I think we're going to confuse things. Let's just,
Would you say outdoor kitchens are allowed?
On grade.
In the setback?
on grade in the setback. So that.
You wanna put a maximum size.
Well, no, so we don't have an outdoor kitchen that is, countertop height and then elevated another 18 inches on the deck. Let's try to keep it real.
Okay.
I'm just thinking if it was 4 by 10 and they had 2 4 by 10s, that's 80 square feet. I wouldn't want any bigger than that, that's for sure. I mean, it's taking over the yard. I'm just wondering if we need to put some maximum number. You're willing to leave that wide open?
I'm willing to. So they have to live in their backyard. I don't.
Well, then we'll just see how it goes there. Are you okay with it?
I am, I'm cautious, if it starts to become a problem and the neighbors are saying, what happened next door? There's this big party central there now out in their yard and I don't like it. Then we might want to limit it.
Those are different rules that need to be.
Well, that's noise.
So for now, we're going to deal with it until we have a problem? We'll just, it's in
The
there.
party people will go on with or without an outside kitchen. That's a law enforcement thing.
I'm going to take a little break here just a little bit. Sir, any questions at this point? You're fine. Okay, good. Just want to check in.
Just
Okay.
having fun watching.
Okay, good. Then
Would the water
they're
department like
included
our tables,
with no restrictions except they have to be at whatever the building code determines.
Unless you think that there's anything that you should caution us about, that you've heard of problems in other cities that have allowed these, and they become a nuisance to the neighbors.
I mean, the only concern that I've heard is sort of what Councilmember Harlan mentioned, small lots, you have maybe increased activity, might not be, in the interest of the neighbors. The other side of it is it does promote some social activity outside, so I think it's really a policy call. We don't have any guidance with the code right now, so when they come in, we've tried to treat them, a really nice barbecue differently than a full-fledged kitchen. If they come in with a full refrigerator, dishwasher, sink, we say, whoa, whoa, whoa. You can have your grill, you can have a small sink, but don't go overboard. But this would at least give us clear direction. You could put whatever you want.
Promoting barbecues, not outdoor kitchens. Right. Because the only thing I know that the phenomenon now is fire pits. There's a the floodgates are open on fire pits. I see more and more of those, but we haven't had a problem with them yet.
Too much greenhouse gas.
Well, as long as they're not, too close to the curb. But I guess we don't have a problem with this. There hasn't been a problem with.
I mean, I haven't heard of any. I think I just projected one example. I just Googled up, there would probably, in my mind, be a full kitchen, not a really nice barbecue.
There's 24 houses in Capitola where that would fit.
Well, that's about 80 square feet right there.
Yeah.
Well, Cliffwood Heights could have them. I mean, those lots in the backyards in Cliffwood
Cliffwood's got
Heights
some nice
are huge.
Outdoor kitchen overlay.
I don't have any
But
problem with somebody having
some
that.
people, when they look at this is what they think they say, that's what I want. I mean, that's like the perfect outdoor.
Yes, I've seen houses
No,
like
I
this.
know, and that's about, like I said, if you get bigger than that, but
They love them.
So how high is that trellis there, if we're calling that a trellis?
That there's probably 9 feet, probably.
I mean, that's almost more than I would think we would
That's
want.
not, that's just not allowed. I mean,
Yeah, we don't want
I think we're talking about the counter space.
I mean, you draw some blinds on that and you've got a room. Okay,
So that's
sleeping,
a $120,000 job there, so.
I'm just talking about the space.
I do a lot of barbecuing with that one.
I think what we envisioned was not, these are all pretty elaborate as to what we're talking about.
Well, Cliffwood Heights might want to put those
I think
in.
we'll just have to see how it goes. If it becomes a problem, then we'll go from there. Are we okay with that? Fine.
Onward.
I think we have clear direction, and pizza ovens will expressly,
No. Pizza oven.
Well, no, I think that has to go before pizza oven should go before the planning commission, because the neighbors need to be noticed
Right.
for something that
Yes,
formidable.
with that nuisance factor you're talking about.
Smoke? Is it a smoke issue?
Well, no, it's not a smoke issue, it's just, they're large. It's not like this outdoor kitchen, which I have no problem with, like a big giant barbecue.
Fully vented, anytime we anticipate increasing noise, that would be.
The pizza oven concern, is that based on like a chimney, as you
No, it's
mentioned earlier?
more, size, the chimney.
Correct.
It can be imposing on neighbors having a pizza oven close to the setback. And I think that it may be
Within
just
the
fine.
setback, fine, just not an encroachment and closer to the property line.
Yeah, and I think that kind of a structure should be noticed.
Even if it's off the setbacks? Let's say you do it in the middle of the yard, or you make a distance away from the property
That's
line.
different. I don't know what's the appropriate spacing for a pizza oven from a property line.
It shouldn't be carte blanche for a pizza oven. That's something unique. It should be something that should be reviewed. I can't see we just okay to go build a pizza oven.
yeah. I think we'll exclude wood-fired stoves, right? 'Cause it's really the smoke and the
There's a whole lot. to it.
chimney.
A
and
pizza
all
oven,
that
because,
pizza.
I mean, a barbecue is basically a wood-fired stove.
Okay.
But the pizza oven is a structure, and I think it's a structure that you can see. It's an outdoor structure. We would require planning commission review of that anyway.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we say if you're 10 foot off of all property lines, you can do with the staff approval with a building permit.
Over the
If it- 10
staff
foot off.
approval.
That would
Some approval, okay.
Okay, that would give an avenue for somebody to do it, but they got to be 10 foot off every.
Anything closer-
If you want any closer, you have to go to planning commission.
That's reasonable.
I think that's wise. I don't even know if we'd want a kitchen right built up against the property line so that.
No, we wouldn't.
But we're just talking about pizza ovens now. We're not talking about
Right.
backyard kitchens. And I think Councilmember Norton is pressing this issue because he's looking forward to me maybe putting a pizza oven in. And he wants it as close to his house as possible.
And a back feed from the backside to the kitchen.
Feed through.
Any structures that are close to the property line, we need to be sensitive about. I don't care what they are.
That's, So I'd like some clarity, please, on the setbacks for a kitchen. I just heard 10 feet for.
No.
We're only talking pizza ovens on that.
Okay,
No
so
setback to kitchens.
no setbacks.
We're
for
past the
kitchens.
kitchens. The kitchens
No
are done
setback
deal.
for kitchens.
Piece of our heart, we're on the back
Whatever,
pocket.
whatever.
And then pizza ovens require, if you make the 10-foot setback, it's staff discretion. And then if it's less than 10 foot, it has to go to.
Oh, hold on, Des. What's our setback for the hot tubs from the property line?
5 feet.
Then it should be same for
Oh,
kitchen.
no, 2 feet.
I thought it was
Excuse me.
2. I would want the same 2 feet
For the
for that
kitchen,
kitchen.
yeah. You don't, I don't, we don't want a kitchen on the property line.
I don't want anything on the property line.
Yeah.
2 feet,
I don't want
Dennis,
to-
it's
I
this
don't want
much.
to lay people.
It's all,
And you got to walk my neighborhood.
I know.
Because every other house has.
I've been in your backyard, I've been in a lot of this,
lots.
I've been in a lot of those neighborhoods, and to ask for 2 feet, I don't think is unreasonable.
What happens is you create a dead zone behind it. It isn't functional for a yard to have a barbecue in the middle of it.
It's called a neighborhood zone, is what it is. It's a
That's where you
it's a
put your
space zone.
ladders.
Yeah.
Put your ladder,
You know what
your
they're-
go-kart.
Yeah, I think so.
Remember how we had the 6-inch sign, the 12-inch sign? I don't need to go 5 feet. I don't want to be in a line. I think 2 feet is a reasonable setback.
Is it a danger issue you're complaining about, or what?
Privacy issue. It's a privacy for anything. If you're going to cook, if you're going to grow trellis, if you're going to have a hot tub, whatever you're going to do, stay 2 feet away from the fence.
I'm sorry, I disagree.
I know you do. I know, and we may have a vote on this one. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just voicing my opinion.
Okay.
It's just my opinion.
They're everywhere now, Ed.
I got it.
And if you design your backyard and you have a small backyard, you will put your barbecue against the side. You know what they'll do now is they'll just build them and won't come for a permit.
Let's see what other people, do you guys want to weigh in on the 5-foot setback for kitchens?
Doesn't matter to me.
2 is 5.
I think 2, because I wouldn't want somebody building a kitchen right on the other side of the fence right there. That's no privacy at all.
I could wheel my barbecue up to the
I
fence line.
think we're going to need a motion.
Yeah, but a nice neighbor's not going to do that, you know?
The distance between the barbecue and the fence is the Norton dead zone.
It is going to be a business.
We're going to need a motion, Stephanie.
I'll move that we not allow backyard kitchens closer than 2 feet from the property line.
I'll second that. Okay, it's second by Bertrand. Any other discussion? Ryan, can we do a roll call on this one?
Councilmember Tremini?
No.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Yes.
Councilmember Harlan?
Aye.
Councilmember Norton?
No?
Mayor Bottorff?
Aye. That carries 3-2 with the wings dissenting.
It's a little early for us to be silly.
Council-
We should straighten up
Councilman
here.
Termini and Norton dissenting.
Take a break.
We're a little early.
No,
for
are we getting close?
Yes.
Okay, good. That was a good discussion, and that was.
Close to what? The next section, we're here.
What about pizza ovens?
So next we're going to, so pizza ovens have a 10-foot requirement,
Yeah.
and if it's any less, it requires a CUP, or a design permit by planning commission would be
Is that
appropriate.
easy? Is that
That's
easy
correct.
to administer?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Moving on to floor area ratio. So some of the big changes that occurred here. No longer included residential decks, so that adds to the allowance for, you'll see more decks around town, more social.
What page are you on, Genki?
I'm sorry, we're on page 48-4 on the bottom,
Got it?
leading into 48-5. So big changes are in the floor area ratio no longer includes residential decks. Decks on restaurants and hotels are not included. Basements that are not visible, so as long as your basement is completely undergrade. Underground parking structures and 350 square feet of garage on a lot that's 3,000 square feet or less. So this was to allow these really small lots to have garages and not be penalized with their floor area ratios.
Did you say 350?
350 square feet of garage area will not
Yeah.
count towards your floor area ratio. Another addition is that within a multi-story building, the staircase will only count once. So currently, we count for each floor unless it's a story and a half.
I have a question. So a garage that's on, a house that's on a grade, you can see the underground if there's a driveway up to, is that a problem?
It would count towards your floor area ratio if it's visible.
Okay, then I have a problem with that. So they put the garage underground, and the only reason why, they can't make it invisible is because they have an entrance that's coming up from the street,
I mean, a basement underground.
Yeah.
You said garage.
Yeah. So if it's flat, no problem, but if they want to get into this thing,
They can't. It's a stairway. And the whole idea of this is we're trying to contain mass.
Yeah.
This
it's
is a
for-
backward way of us calculating the mass of a house, and that's what we try and do with floor area ratio. So if you can't see it, it doesn't, contribute to the mass. If you can see it, it is part of the mass.
I like the underground parking. So that means the house is going to have to be smaller anyway if you had to include that in the farm.
You need an elevator
Sorry.
to lower your car into it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's kind of stupid.
There's very few
You can
lots
see the
that you
garage
can
and
get
the
underground
front
parking in
slide on
Capitola.
Camino.
The run just from the street to get to the underground, it's going to take up,
But the basement, I applaud the basement. I've always promoted basements. They're easy
think it's
space
great,
that
yes.
don't add anything to the mass. You never see them. And we've had a lot of prospective applicants on Oak Drive up in the 600 block. Fellow wanted to put a basement in. It was calculated at the time of floor area ratio, and he couldn't. Just not good. So these are all great items. I love it. And thanks for finally not counting a stair core every time it passes a floor. Just
That was Dennis's heart attack.
we've gone round and round before, right, Ryan?
We have a lot of discussion on this, I remember, so
Okay, moving on.
I believe we're moving on.
turning the page.
So we'll move on to accessory structures and uses.
Oh, I had an idea out there for 7C, I guess, or something like that. Public, place that public seating areas. Privately owned shopping centers, page 48-6. So if in public recreation, add something in there like, say, 41st or properties in that area, King Plaza. They want to do something like a hot lot or someplace so that people would have a place to do something other than get out to their car.
Right.
So just add public recreation.
And it's excluded from the floor area ratio, which is good. It promotes it. Thank you.
Looks good.
So I think the point was you'd like us to add tot lots?
Tot lots.
Yeah, but something, I said public recreation, so it could be a tot lot, it could be something. 41st had considered a skateboard park, I remember that, a little skateboard thing, I thought that would be cool.
I think it's kind of listed in here as,
Is it?
well,
If it is, that's great.
So typically, if there were a park of any sort, or a tot lot, or parklet, it would not count as your floor area ratio,
Right.
period, because it's not enclosed.
yeah, so it's exempt.
And the reason why we list decks and that type of thing is that they can be a commercial space, so
Oh, okay.
that's the difference.
Item 7, you're just listing out things that are excluded.
No, they're not excluded. They're excluded from the floor area ratio,
Yeah.
not excluded from being able to be done.
Right, so just listing it out, so I was just saying, add that in, that's all.
Is it necessary to add that in, or is
I
it?
don't think it is because it's not a structure.
Okay.
It's
That was
an open
it's a
space
Point of
area.
clarification, it's not necessary.
Structure,
Yeah, it's not
okay.
necessary to add it,
Got
so,
it, thank you.
so we're good. We
So
can-
now we will move on to accessory structures and uses. One big change that came here, we've got the 80 square foot allowance. We have an admin approval of actually it's an over-the-counter admin approval for accessory structures in our existing code. It's 80 square feet over, a design permit is required when you have more than 80 square feet, more than 80 feet, more than 8 feet high in height, or plumbing and electrical. And within the code update, we removed electrical. So if you have an 80 square foot accessory structure in your backyard and you want to have a light so you can at work at nighttime go out and find a bucket of paint that maybe you have stored out there, you can actually turn on a light, find your bucket of paint, and you didn't have to get a big permit from the planning department for that light. So you're still not allowed to have plumbing that goes out to the accessory structure. It still has to be 80 square feet or less and less than 8 feet in height.
So you could
So,
put-
but you can add a light.
you can add one, okay.
Big update to the code.
Well, that's great.
Does that include greenhouses? Because greenhouses usually,
yeah, you can-
greenhouses usually have power.
Yeah.
They usually have power.
Yeah, that could be a greenhouse.
Or your pizza oven.
On the table 17.52-1, I'm thinking the rear setback should be 3 feet, why not 3 feet?
Yes, so I actually created a slide for this one. This is the setback standards for accessory structures. And as Councilmember Bertrand just pointed out, there's different setback requirements. In the side yard, it's 3 feet. In the rear yard, it's 4. And he would like to see that changed to have a 3-foot side yard as well as a 3-foot rear yard.
I don't see the difference, whether it's side or rear. Why it should be one or the other, so. The dead zone idea is sort of my motivation, quite frankly. So I agree with Dennis. I mean, why do we create all these dead zones?
Well, you're gonna,
I voted for the 2-foot.
I have no problem with that. I want to go to 3 feet instead of 4.
well, you're gonna have the structure that's
don't
gonna be
care.
close to a neighbor, and that's the question, is how much privacy do we want to give the neighbors?
Okay,
And that
so-
was the discussion last time we talked about this. If you're gonna have a structure 15 feet high, do you want that 2, 3, or 4 feet from your property line?
Okay, I agree with that, that's part of the problem. So the rear, you get 4 feet, but on the side, you get 3 feet. Why isn't it the same?
Well, it could be, it could be.
So I'm just saying, make it all 3 feet.
Doesn't matter to me.
Or they could all be 4.
Or they could be all 4, I just don't like a big dead zone, because it is a garden chicken right now. So I'll just go 3 feet,
That a motion?
yes.
I'll second that.
3 feet.
Okay, one more.
We had a discussion, we were talking about buildings and about roof pitches, and didn't we have some language, we were trying to keep that building farther away from the rear yard?
Yes. There is a footnote on page 52-2 under that table. Accessory structures less than 8 feet from the interior side yard property may not exceed 12 feet in height. There's also the top of wall plate. It is 9 feet for the maximum height.
I think that was part of the reason why we had that 4 feet. I mean,
So too.
it was intentional.
I vaguely remember that.
Then it should be 4 feet on either side.
Well, I think the side yard sometimes doesn't allow for 4 feet. I mean, there's sometimes, the space, some is narrower. I mean,
Then I have to ask the question, if that footnote is correct, and this drawing obviously is of an accessory structure that is closer than 8 feet from the property line, then how come it's 15 feet high?
That's a good point.
it's a good point, good observation.
Boy, you caught one.
We'll fix that.
I just needed some quiet for a minute, that's all.
Well, I'm gonna stick with the 4 feet.
Well, I think we
You know,
should.
I think that's
Well, no,
why
I think we
did it.
should.
Yeah.
Well, Jock gave us 2 options. He
Yeah.
said 3 and 3 or 4 and 4. I think we should just make it 4 and 4.
I do-
Be
I do
consi- and be
too. I think it's
consistent.
nicer for the neighbors. If they're gonna be building another building in the yard,
To be consistent, will you be okay with 4 and 4?
My perspective, since I built one, is that I wanted one as close to the neighbors as possible. Not that I want to be close to them, but I also asked them if they felt no problem. They had no problem. So I did not have a window on that side. It was just, like a storage shed. So I just didn't want to waste the space. Now it's sort of wasted space.
So is your motion 3 and 3?
Yeah, it's been seconded.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, good.
Okay, any other discussion? Ryan, we're going to do a roll call on this. Motion is to amend it to 3 and 3.
Councilmember Termini,
Aye.
Councilmember Bertrand,
Aye.
Councilmember Harlan,
no?
Councilmember Norton,
Aye.
Mayor Botorff.
No. That carries 3-2 with Bodorf and Harlan dissenting.
Can we get a read on the 15-foot within 8 feet of the property line?
They're going to correct that. They're going to amend that.
Oh,
It's a mistake, yeah.
So what you're saying is
Should
that
be
particular structure should only be 12-foot max.
12, right.
Good, now I understand it.
You corrected it. That was your catch. Okay.
No, I wasn't sure I was right.
Yeah, no, you were, Katie, right? He was 100% right?
100% correct. We will change the height shown on the figure to be 12 feet.
And it will now be 4 and 4? I'm sorry, 3 and 3. 3 and 3. Sorry, 3 and 3.
Yes,
Nice
we will-
try.
Making changes.
I like
Okay.
that, Mr. Mayor. That was well done.
All right.
Okay, next, the accessory structures in non-residential zones. So these are for your commercial properties. This was asked to be brought up as a discussion regarding Zelda's, in reference to Zelda's trash enclosure. What it says here is accessory structures in commercial districts are subject to the same development standards, height and setbacks, as the primary structure in the applicable district. I wanted to bring up that during our last special meeting, you had given us direction to add a design standard actually within the central village, that garbage and recycling that are located to the side and the rear, should be located to the side and the rear of buildings sufficiently screened from public right-of-way and designed into the architecture of the building.
Yes.
So I think you've already taken care of this, but I was glad to have the concern come back up and be able to say that we've addressed it in another section of code. So we would, if an accessory structure came in, such as that enclosure, we would refer them back to, you've got to go through and get a design permit, and within the central village, there's specific guidance. Okay?
Question in reference to Zelda's, which I think is pretty offensive on many occasions. Is there any way that that could be upgraded or changed? Supposing they do some work on the building, we could say, you're not in conformance now, or is that stuck the way it is? It's sort of a blight on the street there.
So no, it was either last year or the previous year, we had a lot of discussions about that at council meetings, and we talked about the enhanced sidewalk cleaning, and we did some work, and I'm not up to date with where the latest and greatest is on that.
I can give a little update.
Yeah.
We're paying for cleaning partially because of Zelda's.
On the cleaning? We now own the entire cleaning program.
Yeah, well, at least for this year. Yeah.
So, there is in progress right now, Zelda's told us that after the Arts and Wine, that they would rebuild that structure and redo the canisters that carry it. There's not any intention by them, according to Larry, to move it, but they're going to make it the containers have to be self-contained, and there has to be a different system disposing it without actually bringing the cans out to put. As you notice, you can't put trash in those containers without wheeling it out of waste because it won't lift up. So there'll be a redesign that allows them to go in there and to do that without pulling out. There'll be a concrete curb that controls anything from pouring out into the public sidewalk, and there'll be different self-contained containers, and they're supposedly starting to work on it right now.
They have to do sanitary sewer drain inside that structure.
That's right.
But my question is, if we're getting ready to approve a permit for a new structure there, maybe we're kind of, there's a little tension here between saying now we have their hearts and minds because they want to build something, let's move it, and them saying, well, then, if you don't want to let me rebuild it, I'll leave it there till the end of time. So
You're talking integrating it into the building like we're
doing
proposing here?
some, yeah, around the back,
The other-
something. I don't
The
know.
other problem with Zelda's is that walkway that goes between that and the other building. It's a real mess too. And they still store stuff up there, and Larry had told them to get their stuff out of there. They got some out of there, some of it's still there. So, it's an ongoing problem with Zelda's, and I think Larry's trying to tackle it. But how far he's gotten, I don't know.
Oh, well, now we're.
But Mike, if you're talking about moving that structure, we need to give direction. I really honestly don't know any place else in the village to move it to. There really isn't.
We just are getting ready to adopt something that wants it to be integrated, but.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we got, but if they were going to build something that was actually going to work, if I believed that the proposed system was going to work, but for me, the problem is anytime they roll those dumpsters out, whatever's on the wheels is now on the sidewalk. So it would have to be some kind of a system where there was something that slid out underneath, like, a false bottom slid out that they rolled on that rolled back in. I mean, it would have to be really a great system.
Transfer vehicles that had an interior.
No, there could just be a pull-out tray that came out underneath what they sat on.
Well, and one of the problems is the way it's set now, they don't have any way to clean inside that thing. You can't go in there and squirt with a hose.
Right.
It just collects water. It just causes a bigger.
No, it
mess.
would have to be-
So it'd have to be some way that you can power wash.
And
the
we're trying
floor
to,
and
we're trying to
inside.
cure a one of right now.
Exactly.
And let's
Well, our
be
code says,
happy with
our
what we
code
have.
says that we want, if they were to apply, once this was adopted, they would have to integrate it into some building.
Right.
Which isn't feasible, and I'm thinking, it's probably better to get this one done and fixed and then apply it
You know,
from here on
there's
out.
been discussions over the years of trying to find a place that was common for it. The problem is you don't want restaurants carrying it a block away to their trash, because they will make a bigger mess. Yeah, so, the policy we have and the way we have it written is probably the best we can do, is saying if you design your building, you design the trash enclosure into the building.
I think we have to leave it, that's our intent, is to improve the system, so I think we just need to leave it the way it is. And whatever they're doing now, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that it works.
Well, if there ever was a new owner at the Mercantile, that would be an opportunity to put a really nice state-of-the-art trash enclosure there, and the various restaurants could participate in that, could be used and owned and paid for by several people, and that would make it better to share the cost of that with several owners, and then they could do it something more high-tech and a little more attractive.
Right.
That's a good place for it, and maybe we give them density credits in exchange.
But I think what we've got in here is a great goal.
Start.
It's a great goal, so. Where does that take us?
It takes us to the next chapter, 17, unless there are any other comments regarding accessory structures and uses.
I think
chapter?
we got that tied up.
Okay, so we're moving on. Archaeological and paleological resources. Within this chapter, I did get one request that under section, on that first page, 56-1, when is an archaeological survey report required? A discussion on, should we add a requirement for when an archaeological resource is found during construction?
This means,
Probably.
this is the entry to having to require an archaeologist to be present during construction. Otherwise, trust me, no one else is going to tell you.
This also leads to a great story. 1810, Capitola Avenue. Right across the street from the Craft Gallery, right in that section there. Louis is walking down the street, he just bought himself a chicken. He's riding down the street and he's eating a chicken. There was a chicken bone over his shoulder. 2002, we're rebuilding the streets there. Construction worker finds the chicken bone on the streets. The construction the job gets shut down for 2 weeks while they define what that bone was. That's the truth.
That is the truth.
That is the
And
truth.
Louis testified that he threw it over his shoulder 12 years prior, okay?
Yes, sorry, there is that.
But then he got a ticket for loitering something.
Okay, I'm glad I'm invigorated by that story. So where does that take us?
And let Ben.
Ben,
Katie suggested that I point out that there is state law that dictates what must happen if archaeological resources are found during construction. It's a typical mitigation measure in a CEQA document, so I'd recommend referencing that rather than replicating it in detail in the ordinance.
But we are not creating the requirement to have an archaeologist on site during construction.
But if something's
We're not.
found, that's already
We're not.
detailed.
Okay.
we're not.
But Carolyn Swift found bones when they were doing those condos across the street from Ed Newman's building. When they did those condos there, and they were starting to dig and so forth, and she was walking to work at Mr. Toots and looking around at things and looking around at the ground and everything, whoop, found something.
Well, they found two whole bodies buried there. It was a mother and a baby, yeah. Pretty heavy.
Okay.
Okay.
On that note,
Good fences make good neighbors, right? So we'll talk about fences, 17.60, a very important chapter because it's one of those things that comes up often at the counter. One big change is that within the first administrative permit section, replacement of an existing fence that is in compliance with the standards of the chapter does not require a permit. There's been it hasn't been clear in previous codes, so now it's clear that you can replace your fence and not come in and get a permit.
As long as the height
As long as
doesn't-
it is on the property line and it complies with this chapter.
Okay.
In terms of additions within the design permit criteria. We added some allowances for deviations to fence standards. That it would be approved by the Planning Commission as long as there's no adverse, actually I have a slide on this, no adverse impacts to the neighboring properties, and one of the following must apply. There must be unique circumstance. So a good example of this is Wharf Road, a very busy street. There's a lot of front yard fences that are a bit higher, and it's necessary for reasonable use and enjoyment of the property. Discussion was requested to add a requirement for neighbor consent when an applicant requests a deviation from a fence standard. So your neighbor would, this would go to Planning Commission, the neighbor would receive a notice, but whether or not you'd like to add an additional requirement that the neighboring properties provide consent on the application, which typically we don't do for variances or any other, it could be a controversial project, but we typically don't ask your neighbor to sign off on anything here. So this is, and I'll let Rich.
Yeah, I would just add my personal opinion. I never like having neighbor consent requirements because neighbors change. Somebody else moves in, they might not agree with somebody that lived there before, but that's just my 2 cents.
So Katie, where did we get to the point where we require a building permit for a fence?
When it's a new fence or you're a brand new fence.
Why do we require it? It's not, there's no structural requirements. There's no building code for a fence. Why do we require that you have a building permit? Most jurisdictions don't require for a 6-foot fence. I don't know why we do.
Yeah, I don't think you even need a building permit for a fence under 6 or 8 feet tall. I'd have to check on the specific number.
You don't?
Not a building permit, it's just a planning permit. And
Well, why would you need a planning permit?
To make sure it's in the right place.
Well, that's something.
well, that's I'm actually glad you brought that up because that is one of the problems we do get with fence permits. Somebody gets a fence permit, they put it in the wrong place, they get an argument with their neighbor, and they want us to arbitrate it. And then our routine is, no, it's a civil matter, go figure it out, hire a surveyor, go to court. City's not here to determine where your property line is.
What is the cost for a fence permit? What's the cost?
I want to say it's $42. It's relatively cheap, but whether or not we should regulate it, I think is a good policy question.
Yeah, it's been done for years. I mean, I can understand if there's a dispute on a property line. You could, if they come to you and you could say that, well, we're going to require you to get a survey because if you don't know exactly where it is or something, there was a question in mind. But it seems to me there's no sense in actually making somebody go through a permit process for something that doesn't require a building permit.
Well, I agree with you, but only because people don't know where their property lines are, and they don't know where the right-of-way is, a lot of times.
Well, we're still not going to verify. You just said we're not
Don't
going to
do
verify.
that.
When we go out, when we go out and do a fence, do we go out and have a final on a fence if somebody builds it, or is it just the permit of the county?
The permit.
So we're not checking the quality of the construction or the height, whether it's 10, anything.
We make quite a few modifications when they come in because people aren't that well versed in the code for a front yard and when it can go up to 6 feet plus the 2-foot lattice. So there is, we usually help them modify the plans, but when they sign off on the permit, they're stating that, the fence is located on their property line and it's just their signature.
And this is what I'm going to build.
Stating that, but we're not going out there and checking the property line or following up after.
I just have a question. So I've received a complaint from a neighbor or constituent that they want to build a fence in the backyard, and the neighbor had destroyed the fence, and so that had been existing, and then put in some sort of structure. Okay, so encroached on the yard. So she actually hired a surveyor and put marks up, and then was going to hire someone to build the fence. That same person took down all the surveyor marks. And she did it again, hired the same surveyor, and put the surveyor marks in, and it happened again. And she's actually scared of the neighbor. So is this something where the city steps in? How do we deal with something like this?
You should call the police, that guy's trespassing and stealing.
My response to those inquiries, and we get them at least a handful a year, is it's a private matter. You need to hire a surveyor, and if you can't come to agreement, seek a mediator or go to court as a last resort.
Outside the city, basically. Okay.
Unless we issued the permit in error. That's the only time I would want to get
I
involved
don't think
in
the
it.
$42 permit is unlikely, maybe being that you're going to give them direction over the counter, it's going to take some time with that. As long as they're not required to have a building permit also.
No, I think we should still have the permit because you are advising them on this is what you need to go build. So I think it's fine as is. Is that what you were?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
we-
So any changes to this section of code, this
No, I
chapter?
think it's good.
So is it, I'm not reading it through, I'm just asking a question on a 6-foot fence can be a solid fence. Anything above that has to be a lattice fence in some manner, and you can go as high as 8 feet, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and front yard is at 3 foot,
Yes.
3 foot 6?
3.5.
3 foot 6 in the front yard, and it can go all the way to the property line.
Unless in some weird circumstance obstructed sight distance.
Okay. And the backyard fences can go only even with the outs perimeter of the building.
Sorry.
On your front fence can only go even with the front of your building, it's as far as it can go forward. It can't go forward of any place on any structure. It's the same on the side yard. For instance, on a corner lot. Yeah, okay. All right.
Yes.
That's easy to administer, right? It seems to be.
Yep. And then you're allowed 2 feet of lattice or other similar material that's at least 50% transparent. One thing that was added under decorative features and materials was a decorative arches and other similar features above an entry walkway, maybe up to 10 feet in height within the required front and exterior side yard. So all the arches you see, we didn't have an avenue to approve those before, now we do.
What section is that again, please?
It's page 60-3, and it's under C, at the
C
top of
number
the
2.
page.
Okay.
C2.
So we
Decorative
haven't gone through
features.
that yet, but, yeah, okay. So I had something on 62.
60-2? Go ahead.
So I was thinking about the issue of what's stated in table 17.6-1, alleyways. From the standpoint of security and privacy, having a 3.5-foot fence there seems problematic. Most alleyways that I go on, the fence is 6 feet or higher, So if I was having a house bordering on an alleyway, I would not want a short fence there.
You can do a 6-foot fence alleyway because it's your backyard.
Well, this says 3.5 feet, so I'd just like to see if we could change that to 6 feet.
This, we could actually remove the standard for alleyway, and if it's in your rear yard, you would have the 6-foot height. If your alleyway is your front yard, then it would be subject to the 3.5 feet.
Okay.
We could do that. Are you okay with that?
And there's so limited alleys in Capitola, I think that would make sense to scratch that.
I think we're in consensus to scratch? Okay, yes.
Okay, any other comments on fences? Okay, environmentally sensitive habitats. I am checking on one item for Councilmember Bertrand regarding the names that are used under applicability to make sure that they line up with the Capitola's LCP. So I'll be doing that, and any changes I'll let Ben know. Any other modifications in this chapter? Oh, I have one, actually.
For G4,
So, under
64-5.
64-5?
Yeah, so I was just saying if we're going to replace plants that we go to native species, locally native species. That would be item E4, I think.
So Councilmember Bertrand brought this up to me earlier, and I think the appropriate place for the revision would be actually earlier in the chapter under 17, let's see, page 64-3, because these are what applies to all. It's the general standards, and we're talking about the removal of native riparian trees, and he would like added that any replanting must be of native vegetation.
Okay.
And I think that would be the correct place to
No-brainer.
put that.
In that section there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stephanie, go
Well, I
ahead.
just had a quick question about wood-burning fireplaces. Are there any homes close enough to the Rispin that we should prohibit them there because there was and is a monarch butterfly colony there? And I think the homes and the apartments are pretty far away, but maybe let's just take a second look at that and see if there's any area there that maybe a block or so that we should prohibit them in case they come in for a tear down remodel,
Take a break.
just to be consistent.
Monterey Bay Air Quality Control District would love us not to have any wood-burning fireplaces,
Right.
but we don't have the kind of issues that the valley does. We don't trap smoke, so, but I,
No.
certainly to Stephanie's point.
Let's just do an aerial look at that and see if there's any area there.
Fortunately, we're in a good proximity, I think, there.
I know that the apartments next to it do not.
No, they don't
There's
have
no
fireplaces.
fireplace.
That's why I said the proximity is
But-
good for that.
Across the creek would be more likely, along Riverview there. There could be houses along there that could,
Or just smoke coming up the creek.
there's smoke coming up the creek, yeah. Bonfires on the beach.
Bonfires on the beach.
One comment I did have about the native species requirement, I think it's a good suggestion, but it does occur to me that in our monarch butterfly areas, they like acacias, eucalyptus, and a lot of other non-native plants that those butterflies like. So I would suggest we have some exception for monarch butterfly habitat.
I'm sure that.
Which I'm not crazy
I feel
about
fairly
personally,
comfortable
but-
that'll meet with
Yeah.
approval upon Jock's return. Are you ready to go to another section?
Sure.
What,
Can we stop at 8:30?
I was going to ask, what's your forecast? Where are you, where are you trying to get us?
Let's see.
We got lots here, look.
If we could get through geological hazards and landscaping, that would be perfect with the slideshow this evening.
Okay? We're
That
going to
would-
set a target of 8:30. How's that? We'll see how it goes.
Sure. Okay, so geological hazards. There were no requests for discussion. This is Chapter 17.68. Are there any comments this evening?
I see no red lines in there. It looks good.
Okay.
Hold it. When Jock comes, we'll ask him. We'll go back real quick, but let's go ahead and keep moving
Okay.
forward.
Landscaping, Chapter 17.72.
In fact, we'll hold up.
Yeah.
Jock, we're going to try to amend your native tree planting. If it meets with your approval. There was some discussion that in the eucalyptus grows in the monarch by habitat, that there's certain type of plants that they enjoy and they're not native, but we want to make an, how did you put that, Rich? Exception.
Yeah, for butterfly habitat, eucalyptus, acacia,
That was it.
Milkweed.
Milkweed,
Exception in a
right.
sensitive habitat area.
Milkweed's native, I think.
Well, to replace with things that butterflies like.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we went through the geological section, didn't have any comments unless you had 17
I
points.
left at that point, yeah.
Did you have any comments on 1768?
No.
Okay, then that takes us to the final section. We're going to do 17.72 landscaping.
Okay, I just want to note that the Soquel Creek Water District did review this chapter, and they added edits which have been incorporated into the chapter, so just know that their eyes have been on this. Within applicability, the page 72-1, a question came up, or a request to discuss the threshold for multifamily and non-residential projects, that they're required to comply with this chapter whenever there's construction of a new structure, or if there is an addition that increases the floor area of a multifamily or non-residential structure by 3,000 feet or more. So that is a new standard that a landscape plan will be looked at once it hits the 3,000 square foot threshold. The Planning Commission spent quite a bit of time going through when a single-family home should be reviewed for their landscaping and when the multifamily. So the 3,000 square foot threshold, it's any new structure for construction would definitely require a review of a landscape plan, but if it's a redevelopment with an addition, once it hits 3,000 square feet, it has to be reviewed for landscaping.
Since all of Capitola is in Soquel Water District, why are you even doing this? Because they do the same thing already. They already review our plans. So why even tackle this at our level?
I believe in looking at good site planning and making sure that landscapes are, when you've got multifamily, and utilizing hedges and that type of thing for privacy. We've got some requirements for open space to have some privacy. It's good to be able to look at a landscape plan.
Does this apply only to front yards?
No,
Applies to the whole yard?
the whole yard, yes.
We have no enforcement on this, meaning that we don't, it doesn't take a building permit to change a plant or tree. So at any time, somebody could put anything they want to in their plant in there and take it out the next day and plant something else, and there isn't anything we can do about it. So, it's like, it makes sense to me for people's front yard where they may share an environment with their neighbors, but I don't think anything within the backyard within fences should be something that we require a landscape permit unless it's required by Soquel Creek where they want to see, permeable areas, that type of thing. We require patios and those type of things shown on plans, but I don't know why it matters to us. We should be able to just say planting area, in other words, on a plans, other than going to, because what we're being forced to today in this process is you're forced to go to a landscape architect to design all over your house. You're talking another $3,000 in the cost of a permit that could be handled by if you define your hardscape and you define your front yard. I think that seems to be sufficient what the city would require. Now, I'm not sure that Soquel Creek Water District agrees with me on that, but I think that backyards are private domain. People really can do anything they want. If they want to put AstroTurf for the whole backyard, they could come in with that permit. Is that correct? It's all permeable. They could just put AstroTurf. So why do we want to get into being the plant police? I don't know that we want to do that.
Because we don't want them to put in AstroTurf.
Well, we can't tell them not to.
Doesn't qualify as a planted area, does it? Or does it?
That's not our definition of planted area.
We've been allowing it to count as planting area when people put in turf. So I'll draw to your attention for
Artificial turf.
single-family homes, it's when a design permit comes in that goes before Planning Commission as the threshold. So under those scenarios, you've got an application in front of you, someone's putting on an addition, and they want to look at the area that's being disturbed.
I don't know why the planning commission of this city should care what people do in their backyard. We shouldn't have any say. Nobody, we're not asking people to look in the backyard. We don't want to be able to, we shouldn't be required to police it. Why should we spend time actually administering it? Besides, the person can take anything out of there in a day and put everywhere they want in. We don't have any regulatory authority with this type of
But it's just the front and the side that we're talking about, correct?
No, they're talking about the back, too.
It's the whole property.
I'm seeing required landscape area in R1 zoning as being the front and side. Or it's a
Where do you
corner
see it?
lot.
Where do you see that?
72-3? Am I reading that wrong?
So if you, above that, under 17.72.50,
Right.
residential zoning districts, it says all required front and street side setback areas excluding areas required for access to the property shall be landscaped and maintained. You are correct. I thought it was
Street
right.
side setback. So if this were between two houses, we're only going to be requiring the front to be landscaped, and that's fine.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, that's what we got here.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought it was,
And the only time we talk about the side yard setback is if it's a corner lot.
yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, what I wanted to talk about was back on 72.1 for new construction remodels of commercial, industrial, multifamily. If they add 3,000 square feet, I was thinking that would trigger the requirement for land to meet the landscaping requirements, or to look at the landscaping requirements. Maybe they already exceeded it. But I was thinking 3,000 square feet was a lot, and maybe we should go down to 1,500 square feet if somebody wanted to add 1,500 square feet. But now that I think about it, I don't remember any multifamily or commercial industrial properties. They're just going to add 1,500 square feet. They're going to do
As much as they can.
And even so, 3,000 square feet is pretty small for them.
Right.
So I changed my mind on that one.
That's a great number, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're okay on that one.
The only thing I had about this was the idea of an invasive species. So, like Dutch broom, once it gets to a certain height, it just reseeds out all over. And that's why you see it on all, like the freeways and so you to me, you're sort of a weird area. Some people might like ivy, and that gets everywhere, and, you know, kills redwood trees. So I don't know where to define that, but it seems to me that it's something that could spread rapidly through seed, air.
Invasive
wind.
species.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of invasive
Pampas
species.
grass, things like
Pampas grass.
Pampas grass and stuff like that, 'cause,
That's invasive.
yeah, it just goes all over the neighborhood real fast, and neighbors might not like that too much.
Oh, it's horrible stuff to get rid of.
So
Yeah.
I would just ask staff to look into that, because there's probably some wording that you could find.
Well, I think that's something that's commonly used for properties that abut natural open space areas so that the plants don't migrate into those,
I
you know,
could
more
see
sensitive
that.
areas.
So maybe something similar for,
I think something like that we could work with. I would have enforcement concerns if we did that citywide and somebody in the middle of a developed area had a plan. There's many different lists of plants. We have to figure out which list of invasive plants we're going to use. And grasses can sometimes be very invasive. So I have a little bit of concern about administrating that.
Just
but-
had this, we kind of decided on the cusp that we did not want to be the landscape police.
We
The other
do
thing-
have a weed abatement ordinance in the city. In other words, if somebody has a bad lot they're not taking care of.
Maybe you
we
could
can
look
go
into
into that.
something, Rich, that we can live with, that's not too prohibiting. 'Cause
I'll
like I
take-
said, we do not want to create an enforcement situation.
yeah, I don't want an enforcement situation also, but I do realize that there's some things that could, you know, just once they get going, they
And
could.
there might be really noxious plants that we want to look at a little more closely. And also, just to give context to the landscaping discussion, by and large, I think this chapter is pretty much what we have today. The exception is the Planning Commission did add that during the design review process for single-family homes, we'd also apply this chapter to single-family lots. The current code does not apply to single-family lots.
Okay,
So that's the one
I'm okay
significant
with that,
change.
but we're not talking about rear yards. We're talking about
We
side
clarified
yards
no
on
rear yards,
corners or front yards. Okay.
right? Okay.
And my concern also is that when plans go out, they have a full landscaping plan every time. And I didn't see that happen in the past, and I hope it's happening now, but I just want to make sure an application is not complete until the landscaping plan's in there, and planning commissioners can look at it, and council members can look at it. Not just a little drawing of something, but, you know, the landscape plan needs to be in all packets. So I hope it is now. If it is, I'm
think it's pretty well current,
mistaken.
yeah.
Well, I've seen it sometimes when it's not. It's like, oh, they forgot it. Well, we can't forget it.
Okay, last chance for questions. You're good. Okay, Katie, are we at our negotiated?
We
Oh,
are?
I have another issue.
One more.
Okay, 72-3, number 2, in the MUV and MUN zoning districts, outdoor dining areas, courtyards, and other similar quasi-public areas may count towards landscaping requirements. I don't want courtyards and other, dining areas to count as landscaping. I want landscaping. I want plants for landscaping. So if they want to do a courtyard, that's fine, but they still have to have plants. If they want to do an outdoor dining area, they still have to have plants. So I don't want, it says in all other zoning districts that may not count towards landscaping requirements. But I understand that in some of those areas, you know, you don't have room for landscaping. So that's the problem. On Capitola Road, when those houses come in, that's MUV or MUN? MUV.
MU.
Which one are we talking, whereabouts?
Capitola Road. So I created a slide for this one, and in speaking with Councilmember Harlan on this, maybe adding a percentage of, so if you have hardscapes such as outdoor dining areas, courtyards, and other similar areas, may count, you could put up to 50% of the landscaping requirement, or up to 75%.
Give them a little credit for that, but they also have to put some plants in there. They can't just hardscape it.
Right, okay.
Is 75% a number that,
I could be okay with 75%.
That's too much.
How about if the trellis was
50%?
there?
50%.
Yeah, let's try that and see.
How about if the
I
trellis
mean,
was there that had
consider this,
plants
if I have a 1,000 square foot patio dining area, that means that just counted for 1,000 square feet of landscaping. Or it counted for 750 square feet of landscaping. It ain't even close to landscaping. It's concrete.
Yeah.
How about 50%?
I'd have to see an example of that, what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to happen.
Percent just seems huge.
Well, it doesn't have to happen there. What we're saying is the overall requirement for landscaping can't be taken up by hardscape.
This is a non-residential zone.
Right,
Yeah,
it's
we're
business
giving them-
areas, but we
we're
still
giving
want them.
Credit for
to-
hardscape,
Yeah.
instead of landscaping, 50% is pretty generous, I think.
Could you go with a bigger number?
No, I'm trying to get it down. We're trying to
I
get
was
it-
liking 75.
I
just
know
wondered
you
if
were
had
liking
more-
75.
I was
Since
wondering if
then.
we had any more room.
Well, I
I
think
have
we'd
one
be sorry if
example.
we did that. We'd look at it and go, really?
We're giving them 75% of their allowed landscape area in concrete.
Input.
Okay,
but
one
remember
example
that-
is
One
the
example.
long-awaited Mexican restaurant at Capitola Avenue
With the pergola.
Still
with
holding
the
our breath.
pergola. We're all waiting because it hasn't quite opened. But that is an example of, that would be the front yard, and we call that a courtyard outdoor dining, that's an outdoor dining area. He's put in a beautiful water feature, there's some plants that are in pots,
Okay.
still alive, but I would say that a 50% requirement there wouldn't have allowed that great outdoor space to happen, so in that scenario, but maybe a 25% requirement for landscaping would have made it greener and a little softer. So that's one example of,
So
I would say they're about
like a
90%.
60% number. I'm trying to just split hairs with you.
Yeah, but think of this, sidewalks, connections between parking lots, all those things that are in that scenario there, all are natural hardscapes that you need for people to transfer on. They're not going to walk through vegetation. So that naturally takes up a considerable amount. I don't know what the right figure is, particularly in a multiple, because we require a percentage of open space, where there's all kinds of requirements in there that would, that
The Mexican
apply to the
restaurant's
size
a
of-
tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's think about it and bring it back, and then do an aerial view of MUV and MUN.
How about this?
And take a look at the possibilities, because what I'm concerned with is if places are torn down and then they're rebuilt, and then we don't have adequate landscaping requirement for it.
Are we,
I like your idea, sir. Can you bring us back examples of what 75% would look like, what 25% would, just an idea of a occupancy?
well, I'm ready to go to 75%, but if we can say, are those potted plants, is that considered part of their landscaping?
it was part of their
Technically,
plan.
no, but I think
Not
in
in
the
the
case
ground.
of this, it should be. I'm thinking about the back,
As long as they water them and keep them up.
no, the back deck of Cafe Cruz. Perfect example.
So, Mr. Mayor, one idea might be to have a more qualitative requirement where the planning commission would need to approve this if it's attractively designed with potted plants to minimize the, hardscape feel. And
that's
that
a
could
great
be-
solution.
That could be
Up
an
to 75%.
alternative to a specific percentage.
How about up to 75% if approved with, how about
It
that?
has to have planning commission review
Okay.
of the overall
You
plan.
could have trellises that have vines on it. You could have
I'm really afraid to put a percentage on that. I don't think we need to do that.
Well, up to.
Up to.
You got,
Then 75, I wouldn't want to go higher than that.
Okay.
I think that, 50% I thought handcuffed it, and the example given here, the project wouldn't have happened at 50%.
okay,
I think
Staff okay with
75%
that?
with review.
all right.
Consensus?
Yeah, that's fine, I'll try that.
Consensus?
And then I have one other thing, down at the
Okay, go
bottom
ahead.
there, that table of the 70, on page 72-3, the table at the bottom. For those districts, I'd like to add the language, at least 5%.
It says minimum. Okay. At least.
And as a clarification, when the planning commission reviewed the red lines to this, they made the same change, so.
Because somebody might want to do 10% or 15%, and if we say 5%, they'll do just 5%, maybe.
Minimum 5%?
Maybe. No, at least 5%. So that at least, they have to at least do 5%. It leaves the door open that we want them to consider more, maybe.
And that's a minimum of 5%.
Right. However would you like to word that so that concept is portrayed? Okay.
That's it?
Any other questions? We will curtail our efforts at that chapter,
And our next section is 17.76.
17.74,
Secondary dwelling units.
secondary dwelling units, which is a great place to start.
And on the next agenda, we put the numbers on here so the public knows what we're dealing with?
Sure.
Put a whole bunch of numbers, and we'll see how far we get.
And
I believe you'll be adjourning until the special meeting on September 29th, 6 PM.
29th?
We're
28th.
adjourned until the next meeting at 6 PM. You think it's the 29th?
29th.
29.
That's going to be a long day.
Oh, we got meetings and stuff.